I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission this Wednesday, April 24th. We'll all rise for the pledge. And roll call.
Chair Clark, Vice Chair Perry.
Yes.
Commissioner Baker.
Here.
Commissioner Lesnar Buxton.
Here.
Commissioner Longstreet.
Here.
Commissioner Martinez Cohen.
Here.
Commissioner McGill.
Do we have any changes to the agenda? No?
No.
Okay. And I don't see that we have any written communications. So we'll move on to public comment. I'd like to say that any member of the public may address the commission for up to 2 minutes on any subject within the jurisdiction of the commission that is not scheduled for a public discussion before the commission. The total amount of time for public comments will be 15 minutes. Looks like we have one person here for public comment, so welcome, Mr. Kenneth Locke.
My name is Kenneth Locke. I spoke before the City Council yesterday, as well as the Arts Commission the last time they met. As I mentioned, I have a new teaching method for tennis. I call it the Tennisance method. It's kind of the renaissance of tennis. I'm the genius, reached enlightenment, understand the whole basis of the mind-body integration, spirit, kind of like yoga. I have a practice down at the municipal courts where I develop, I'm ambidextrous. I actually became that way. And I did this kind of, the idea is that I'm bringing tennis, I'm transcending it from a sport to where we understand it as an exercise. And the whole basis of developing the whole body, and like when it comes to exercise, there's no reason why. I mean, it had to be kind of not so smart to just develop one side of your body, but when it comes to tennis now, to actually practice it as a exercise, you're going to need to be ambidextrous. You're going to have that focus. And then also, I'm bringing it over, I mentioned that I went before the Arts Commission. It's an art form. And then the whole basis of that is kind of, brings us into the kind of the spiritual, metaphysical. It's similar to like the painting, like Jackson Pollock kind of thing. It's just, and then the idea is it's interdisciplinary. And right now, the relationship that Santa Barbara has with exercise, it's not. You're pretty much focused on sports and promoting sports as a specialized type of education, where when it comes to exercise, we're going to go into an interdisciplinary perspective. I just thought I'd come and actually share this with you. Again, I'm down at the municipal courts every day practicing. Thank you.
Anyone else here for public comment? No. Okay, a youth council report.
Chair Clark, I believe we'll have a youth council member, but perhaps they'll show up a little late and we can take it out of order.
Great, thank you. We'll move to Commissioner Committee assignment reports, and we'll start down with Commissioner Baker.
Hi, good afternoon. I attended a golf advisory committee earlier this month, and I just wanted to highlight a few of the points at the meeting. They have been doing a lot of renovations at the municipal golf course. They've been going well, weather permitted, and they've been getting a lot of positive feedback of those renovations. Some of the bathrooms, the bunkers have been improved. So I recommend getting out there and seeing those improvements. There's many events coming up in May. There's about 4+ events that were scheduled. If you check out their website, all the information will be listed there. So, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Martinez Cohen.
Yes, I attended the Creeks Committee meeting last week on April 17th, and mostly we discussed the budget, which we're going to be talking about later today, so I'll make some questions or comments there. But also they discussed the water quality public awareness survey results, and I think the main PSA takeaway is that all of the storm drain water goes directly to the ocean. It is not treated, and that nothing should go down the drain besides rain. The city, their marketing outreach efforts have been working to educate people, but there is still confusion on a lot of tips and areas and ways that people can not pollute the ocean. So it's really informative, and I just wanted to, mention that. It all goes down the drain. It all goes to the ocean.
Thank you.
The Sea Level Rise Subcommittee and the De La Guerra Plaza renovation subcommittees did not meet this last month.
Commissioner Lesnar Buxton.
I was unfortunately unable to attend the youth council meeting.
Thank you. Commissioner McGill.
The Park Foundation Board did not meet last month. We did a little bit of email business, however, and I was able, happily, to attend the Chef Apprentice graduation dinner a couple of weeks ago, which was great fun. It was really good to see the kids do such a great job, but also how engaged the chef mentors were and how much they were able to really speak to the attributes and contributions of every single member of the group.
Vice Chair Perry.
I was able to attend the Arts and Crafts meeting this last month and found them to be in good spirits and looking forward to a very successful summer, filling their voids and organizing their line down Cabrillo.
I, too, did not attend the canceled park board meeting. I did go to the Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting where we visited each tree on the agenda, and we'll talk about that later. I also attended State Trails Day, which was run by Steve Biddle from the city, and he did an amazing job coordinating all these different user groups. I don't want to list them because I don't want to forget somebody, and I see that it's in your report, so we'll go on to that later. And there's 2 park staffers there, and one of them I see at almost every Trails event, and I wanted to give a shout out to her. It's Kristen. I don't know her last name.
Bain.
Kristen Bain. I see her every volunteer day, and she works so hard, and she's really tenacious, and she provides leadership to other people on the trail. So Steve and Kristen did an amazing job. So I was really proud to be a part of that group. And now we are going to move on to ceremonial items. Oh, he's here. Welcome, Youth Council. I would, please.
Hello, my name is Michael Diaz, and I'm the secretary for the Santa Barbara Youth Council. And I'm here to give you the report we have. Youth Council recruitment ended yesterday, and we currently have 9 open vacancies. And we also have 10 graduating seniors. So we really do need a lot of Youth Council members that are new because a lot of our seniors are leaving to college. So the interviews with the Youth Council start on May 6th and May 20th. And our Teen Leadership Conference is this Saturday. And we're working with the Future Leaders of America and PAL to bring that together. And it will feature an interview with the mayor on leadership. The Youth Council is working with the Gun Safety Task Force to produce PSAs for community education campaign. And special thanks to Councilman Gutierrez for the media training at TVSB. And then finally, our end of the year dinner will be sometime in June. We are still planning it. And that is our report.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz.
Thank you.
And now we'll move on to ceremonial items.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, I don't usually like to call myself out, but I did get a 20-year pin in April for 20 years with the city, which is really quite shocking when I think about it. But I wanted to use this opportunity not to talk about that, but more to talk about the importance of you, the Commission, and giving guidance to the department. It's one of the things that I've enjoyed a lot in my 18 years with Parks and Recreation. I had 2 in community development. The public process, your commitment as volunteers, and then also really recognize the staff that I work with and work around. And when I was first hired, I was asked to promise 5 years. That seemed like an awfully long amount of time. I can say that my opportunity to stay with the city is tremendous, and I feel really fortunate. And it's really because of everybody that I get to work with, both commission at the staff level, and then the other day we had the Neighborhood and Outreach Services did their luncheon for the volunteers for the food distribution program. And so it really takes a tremendous number of people to make Parks and Recreation successful in Santa Barbara, and I'm just lucky that I get to be part of it. So just wanted to use the opportunity to thank others. And you have on your dais this document. On the other side, it really speaks to all the things that we do as a department working in the community. And it's just another opportunity to recognize the breadth and depth of who we are and what we do, and it takes all of us. So that's it. Thanks.
Congratulations.
So,
I made a short thank you list when I was realizing that you received your 20-year pin, and I just wanted to thank you for a few things. I wanted to thank you for your commitment to our city and improving the quality of life of everyone who lives here. I wanted to thank you for the fiscal responsibility with which you run the department. I wanted to thank you for all of the organization of multiple community outreach meetings that you've done over the last 2 years for residents to be a part of the park design process. I feel like people really have a voice with you at the helm. I wanted to thank you for the tenacity with regards to the Cabrillo Pavilion renovation and that you're really making it happen. I wanted to thank you for the diplomacy you show when educating and assisting the public about facility and programming issues that come up. And I wanted to thank you for leading with grace, listening to park users, eliciting feedback from them, supporting all of your staff, managing our city's recreational resources in a way that ensures that we'll continue to enjoy Santa Barbara through our facilities and programs. Thank you. I think we're extremely lucky to have you.
may I just one little interjection? I just really want to say how much I appreciate the overall leadership you show, both in the city and with your team. I mean, I really, every time we have a meeting, I just come away feeling like, you know, this is a team that's pulling together and sharing the same purpose and goals. And I will say, maybe this is a little out of order, but one of my common cocktail hour dinner party conversations is, you know, if we really want to get all the problems in Santa Barbara solved, what I would do is give them all to Jill Zachary and her team. And actually, I'm not kidding, I do. So thank you.
No more problems? Okay. There's a summary of council actions included in our packet. Does anybody have any questions or do you need to say something? I had one quick question. I was just wondering what services that the Waterways Consulting is doing with, oh, sorry, no, that wasn't it. What's the one I had a question? Oh, the Pacific Materials Laboratory. What services does it provide with the construction of the bathhouse and pavilion?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, Pacific Materials Lab, they serve as support to the construction contractor when we have to do any testing on the site related to construction activities. As you can imagine, just a really simple one is the amount of concrete, believe it or not, that we need to build this project, testing strengths, testing materials, and making sure that everything's done to the specification.
Thank you.
I'll make the motion again.
We just accept this one. We don't need to move the summary, just the minutes.
Okay, so moving on to the minutes. Would you like to make your motion again?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll second, yeah.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. That brings us to our Street Tree Advisory Committee items. Thank you.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the first item on your agenda for the tree items is 1030 Kaimalaga. There is a Canary Island pine tree that is fairly small in comparison to the rest on the street. The applicant is concerned with how closely it is planted to the mature Canary Island pine, is requesting to remove the tree and replace with another street tree farther away. The committee felt that there was opportunities to do that, and their recommendation is to approve on the condition that the applicant place with a designated street tree at a location to be determined by staff.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Downey?
Yeah, just a quick question. I mean, when I drove down Kayamiaga, it struck me that that was pretty well planted out. Would you be thinking that you'd be putting, obviously you're not thinking you'd put it in the same place even though there's a tree well there. Are you thinking further down the street? I was just wondering, in this particular instance, is a replacement necessary? Because it was like bing, 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 tree, 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 tree.
Chair Clark, Commissioner McGill, as staff, we look at opportunities to plant trees wherever there's space and it fits the spacing requirements, that it's not on top of a utility line, it's far enough away from a driveway, doesn't create site visibility issues. We look at all those opportunities. In this photo on the right-hand side is a small shrub, and a perfectly acceptable tree well for a tree would provide space for a new tree to give the existing tree more space and the new tree more space. Likely in this case, that's where we would direct them to put a new tree.
Well, I would move that we concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation at 1030 Kayamiaga to remove the tree and replace a designated street tree in a location determined by staff.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next item is 1318 Carpinteria Street. Originally, when we visited the site, once receiving this application, we thought this tree closest to the sidewalk was a jacaranda species. The leaf, it was out of leaf. We've determined that it's actually an albizia species, and we have not determined the exact species of that tree. Applicant is a fairly new owner of this property, and they're in the process of dealing with improvements to the property to bring it up to code in a number of situations. One of those situations is she currently has 2 driveway entrances, and she needs to make that one driveway entrance and make it accessible for 2 cars to be able to park on the lot. These trees are both the albizia species and the African fern pine are directly adjacent to where that driveway has to go in. The part of the requirements will be that stormwater run onto the property rather than off of the property, which requires additional grading at this location to get the grade to switch from leaning towards the street to leaning towards the property. So those factors would create significant grade change adjacent to these 2 trees. The committee wanted to see if there was a possibility to save the albizia species, and we asked the applicant to open up the site underneath the tree so we could look at tree roots to see if it was viable to retain that tree. Staff looked at, she did that, and staff looked at the situation. There was only one root on that side of the tree, and the grading required would have to sever that root. So staff doesn't believe that the tree can be retained if the driveways are installed. The committee recommended approval of the African fern pine, regardless of the decision on the other one, on the condition a tree that can achieve, I think it was 20 to 30 feet in height, be planted somewhere in the front of the property, and recommended that the commission approve the albizia species if staff determined it couldn't be saved with construction. So the recommendation is to approve both on the condition of the replacement tree.
does anyone have any questions? Is the Albizia species, is that a fairly common tree, or just curious?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, we do have many Albizia species. We've identified those other ones as Albizia julibrissin. We do have a few others that are a little bit rare, but we have not yet identified the exact species of this one.
Okay, thank you. We have a speaker on this item, if you'd like to come forward. Mrs. Arlely?
Yes.
Thanks.
Hi. My name is Arelia Arroyo. I'm the new Alvarez. I'm the new owner of 1318 Carpinteria Street. I'm going through remodeling the house, and I'm applying for an ADU. The house came with zoning violations, and I'm working with the city of Santa Barbara, the zoning, building and safety. I'm actually going to a minor zoning violation hearing eventually in the next month or the end of the month. And the transportation department also, because I'm going to remove the carport. That's the plan, or the proposed the proposal I submitted to the drawings to the city. And transportation requested a tandem parking. That is okay, so I applied for it, the waiver, and now the driveway is going to be replaced. It's going to be about 55 feet in depth with a slope, and the footing on that driveway needs to be deep because the site slopes down. And when the staff came by the house to look at the roots, and if you see the picture, that tree is already leaning towards the neighbors at 1314 Carpinteria Street. I'm not an expert, but I know that if the tree falls on one side, it's going to fall right on top of the neighbor's property. And with the construction happening, the contractors may not be able to save it because it's already cracking the driveway. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have anything to say? I do feel that this meets one of our findings for removal, that it's reasonable development of the property and able to enable the property owner to make the property livable and safe and not one big zoning violation. It seems like that tree does unfortunately have to be removed.
Yeah, I'm willing to make a motion if we're ready.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I move that we approve the committee's recommendation to remove the Albizia and the Afrocarpus gracilior on the condition that one replacement tree be planted that has the potential to achieve 30 feet in height.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next item on the agenda is 2131 Red Rose Way. There's a Norfolk Island pine in front yard of the property there. The applicant is the owner of the property wishes to deal with this large tree while they're still able to benefit their heirs in the future. The concern is the tree is large, too large for the lot, and concerns that the tree would be unsafe and would really cause catastrophic damage if it should fall. The committee evaluated the request, went out to the site. They actually determined that there's much more rooting space in this front yard than there is for much bigger trees of this species, and feel that the space in the yard is adequate for the tree, that the neighborhood is quite barren of canopy trees and the canopy is important, and they did not observe any defects which would preclude the safety of the tree. So the committee recommends that the commission deny the removal of the Norfolk Island pine.
Questions of Mr. Downey? Okay, being no questions, we do have a speaker on the subject. Mrs. Blanco, please come forward.
Hello. My name is Karen Blanco, and our family owns the property at 2131 Red Rose Way. The star pine in our yard is 60 to 80 feet tall, we estimate, which is equivalent to having a 6-story building in our front yard. The bungalow itself is only 800 square feet, 1 story, so this monster plant/tree is completely and utterly ludicrous in our 15 by 20 foot yard. The plant drops material all over our yard and the next door neighbor's yard, about which she has complained to me. I was told by the committee that our specimen is only 3/4 fully grown, so it can reach the full 100 feet by 60 feet to which these plants can grow. It is completely absurd in front of our small house, as you can see from the photos that I provided. Also, no one can say for sure that our specimen will not become diseased and dangerous in the future. We do not want to assume the risk of having it fall and kill someone. Also, the San Diego County Department of Planning and Land Use released a paper titled Fire, Plants, Defensible Space, and You, the copy here. On page 16 of this paper, the star pine is listed as, quote, highly flammable, unquote, and, quote, should be avoided when planting within the first 50 feet adjacent to a structure, unquote. Our monster plant sits 10 feet from our house and 10 feet from the neighbor's house. Finally, I do not want to plant a replacement tree in the front yard. Currently, we have several healthy succulents, banana trees, lily of the Nile plants. So I want to add more shrubs and bushes of varying sizes and colors because we have a family member currently in the house for whom I serve as advocate. And my responsibility, may I just finish the sentence, please?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And my responsibility is to try and help this family member's life be as simple and as stress-free as possible. This family member is not able to handle problems like our monster plant or any future large trees. Since I only have perhaps 20 years of life left, I want to remove this problem while I'm still alive and able. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for speaking. Do we have any thing to say? Who should we start with?
Just a question. Mr. Downey, as the tree grows to its full height, in your estimation, how long would that take, and would a fully grown tree create a different issue with root space in the yard?
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, I would anticipate that in the next 30 to 40 years it would be fully mature. An example of this tree is the Tree of Light. It's a historic tree at the corner of Chapala and Carrillo. That one is fully mature and is, again, in a space much smaller than this front yard and doing quite well. The key at this point for the committee is there were no observable defects in the tree. Nothing about the decision today precludes them from coming back to request removal at a later time if conditions change. So the committee's position was the issue hasn't demonstrated to be a problem in this tree yet. So at this time, they're recommending denial.
And did you discuss at all a conditional approval on planting a different kind of canopy tree that potentially doesn't have a fire flag, even though I recognize that this is quite isolated from the...
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, the committee did not discuss the fire issue. It wasn't something that was brought up to them. they felt that this tree was vital for the area because there is so little tree canopy in the area.
I have just one follow-up. I think it's similar to her question. The age, the approximate age of the tree, is it halfway through its lifespan? 3/4 is the height? I don't know.
Chair Clark, Commissioner Martinez-Cohen, the assessment that the applicant stated is pretty accurate. It's about 3/4 mature.
Mr. Downey, do you know how many trees in our urban forest are halfway to 3/4 of the way through their lifespan, and what the city would look like if we took them all out?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, we did a study on tree canopy, and our average tree canopy was mature. And that would represent probably 50% of the street trees that Parks and Recreation manages. So losing 50% of the canopy would be quite drastic.
Can I ask just one more question? The committee noted that there was no indication of any stress or disease or issues with the tree now. Is that something that, if were that to happen, I know this is a bit of an open-ended question, would it be apparent enough to a layperson that they would be able to react in a timely manner and get back to you?
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, the answer is maybe. We always recommend that citizens hire a professional to assess their trees. That would be our recommendation, that they provide a regular inspection and maintenance of their own trees.
Mr. Downey, you're comparing this to the tree that's outside of the front of Ralph's, aren't you?
That's correct.
Comparatively, if they're the same species, this couldn't possibly be 3/4 height. And that thing is gargantuan, and it's been gargantuan since the 60s in comparison. Will this actually grow to that caliber?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Perry, absolutely it has the potential to grow to that stature.
Wouldn't it be a misfit on a city street, though? To have that type of a canopy, that type of a tree sitting on the curbside of a narrow residential block?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Perry, that's certainly something for the commission to consider, and the committee felt that the canopy was important to the neighborhood.
Am I allowed to add just one thing? No? Because there was a mistake. Somebody thinks it's too far from the house. One clarification?
Generally, you have your 2 minutes of speaking. If it's okay with everyone else, you could ask your question or make a clarification.
Very short. It's just one clarification. In that picture, it looks far away from the houses.
We all visited it. We all did. We all went out and looked at it.
If I went next door to speak to the owner next door to tell her that I was trying to have this tree removed, when you're standing on her front porch, you look up and our tree comes all the way across like this. It's like where you are standing on her porch. So it's very intrusive. It's closer than it appears in that photo.
Thank you.
I drive this street regularly, and it is a barren street. This is not simply a canopy tree, it's a skyline tree. It is a landmark in that area, and taking it down would be a real loss, I feel, to the community.
I would tend to agree with that. It's a really good-looking tree, and I would make a motion to concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee based on their determination that it does have suitable rooting space and does provide that much-needed canopy for the neighborhood, and recommend the commission deny the removal.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? And to remind everybody present that any action of the Parks and Recreation Commission is appealable to City Council within 10 business days.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, in the 400 block of Allen Road, a citizen trying to beautify the neighborhood planted king palms in the parkway, which is not currently designated. When working with them about that enforcement case, they asked if there was options that they could pursue to retain the trees in the parkway. I discussed with them the designated street tree considerations, and they elected to pursue this request for that reason. The currently designated tree is the Chinese pistache. There are multiple trees on Allen Road that are doing quite well. The applicant's presentation was that the king palms kind of give the area a beach feel. It's an area that people park to go to Arroyo Burro Beach, and he felt that it was very consistent with that beach feel. The committee evaluated that request. The parkways are 6 feet at this location, and we typically utilize palms in areas that are much smaller because canopy trees provide so many more benefits than the palms do other than aesthetics. The committee felt that having king palms here was underutilizing the parkway space. Their recommendation is that the request to co-designate king palm be denied.
May I ask a question? Can I ask a point of clarification? So if the request, if we don't co-designate the king palm, do they have to remove all the trees? Is that what that means?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Martinez-Cohen, if the request to co-designate the king palm is not successful, they will be required to remove the palms. The good thing is they're small enough and young enough that they can be relocated to his private property or anywhere else that he likes, as long as they're not in the parkway.
And just a follow-up to that, then it would be up to the city to decide when and whether to put in properly designated street trees.
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, at this location, there are, at the address of the enforcement case, there are 4 designated trees, and the king palms are planted in between them. As the canopy trees mature, they will more than adequately cover that area.
Sorry, just one more point. And so, just as an educational thing, this homeowner shouldn't have gotten approval to plant those trees prior to doing so. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
About when did this gentleman put in the king palms?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Lesnar Buxton, it was reported to us in March, and they looked to be fairly newly planted when we visited the site at that point.
I'm usually a fan of co-designations. I do like it. I mean, there are certain streets it's great to have everything match, but I do sometimes like the variations in heights and things. Will we be achieving something aesthetically pleasing with this? With the palms there, or is it?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet, the tree has a number of different varieties currently planted along there. Part of that is due to changes in the designation over time. We've got a couple of really rare trees out there that are different species. We've got a variety of tall and short and big and small trees out there already. The committee felt that the palms would just, the only reason to support it might be aesthetic, and they don't provide values beyond that in this particular application.
So can I ask a follow-up? So you said that basically that part of the parkway is effectively planted out with designated canopy trees, and that at least that's how I understood what you said, and that these trees are infilling between these canopy trees. So I guess my fundamental question is, if these trees aren't doing any harm, they give it a beachy look, it's a fairly variegated planting as it is, why not? What's the harm?
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, one of the things that we look at when we're designating trees is we like to have trees that have similar maintenance needs so that staff can be efficient about maintaining those trees. The palms have a very high frequency of maintenance. The other trees have a much lower frequency of maintenance, which would require us to go out there more regularly to trim the palms on a more frequent schedule than the other trees on the street. So the maintaining a consistency as far as maintenance needs is in a time where we don't have as much budget as we would like to maintain trees. It's an important consideration for both the committee and staff.
Is it possible, I'm sure the answer to this is no, but I'll ask anyways, is it possible to approve something like this on the condition that the homeowner maintain the trees? Yeah.
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, we can't do an agreement like this on a case-by-case basis.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, I would like to commend Tim Downey for wanting to work with this property owner when they went and planted trees in the parkway without permission. Maybe there are times where, gosh, great idea, wish we did that. Most of the time that's not the case. And as you will hear soon with our budget presentation, we receive less than $900,000 a year to maintain all of the city's street trees. And so our tree pruning schedules are rather tight, and the demands on the forestry staff are very significant. So when you think about what makes sense from a community benefit standpoint and from a limited city budget standpoint, and then also the example this will set, it could prove to be pretty challenging. So I think in many ways the applicant, or at least as a result of the enforcement case, could have just been required to remove them. In this case, we're trying to at least, it didn't like the outcome, but we said there's options, not sure you're going to be successful, but we allowed to move it forward in an interest of trying to be collaborative with the property owner. And this situation may not be the best choice.
Well, I would make a motion on the grounds of maintenance, and also in consideration of the fact that we have many people's Christmas trees planted in our parkways that we then are maintaining, and that volunteerism sometimes presents some problems, that we deny the co-designation of the King Palm for the 400 block of Allen Road.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Mr. Downey. And now we come to our director's report.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, first of all, thank you, Chair Clark, for your ongoing support of our trails work. We started doing this, as Commissioner Longstreet will remember, back in 2007 as part of a multi-jurisdictional team. And at the time, this hearing room was packed with people worried that we were going to close the trails and not let them on the trails. Here we are 12 years later. We've been through 5 fires and any number of calamities, an economic downturn, and we still don't have any more money to maintain trails than we did in 2007. However, as you can see from the report you have before you, we have an increasing number of people committed to coming out and volunteering for trail maintenance days, organized ones by the city and by other agencies and collaborators, but they're also out there working with permission from the Forest Service on non-group days. So this is a tremendous demonstration of the growing commitment of the community to come out and volunteer, because frankly, there isn't any money to do it. It's only really through volunteer work that these trails are maintained. And then the Chef Apprentice graduation. Thank you, Commissioner McGill. It was quite an event. The place was packed, Westside Center. I think we had 5 courses, 6 courses, a lot of courses of food. We traveled the world. We had a culinary adventure. It's been a wonderful to see that program grow and become what it is. And the adults that work with the youth are really committed, and it's really tremendous to see that. As you can see from the report, too, they fundraised. So this is a fundraiser, and those funds go back into the program for the next round of youth to participate next year. And Earth Day is right around the corner. It sort of flip-flopped with Easter this year. Last year, Earth Day was first, Easter was second. We did have a great extravaganza event at Chase Palm Park in Bonnet last weekend, and this weekend, Earth Day, which is organized by the Community Environmental Council, is proving to be quite full of fun things to do. We're there as a city agency, along with our other colleagues in the city, and are presenting lots of different things about what we do to enhance Santa Barbara's environment. And then the Arroyo Borough Open Space Restoration Ribbon Cutting, another project. When we think about how long things take to get done, this is one of those ones. We never knew years ago that this property would one day become parkland. The Creeks Division's done a tremendous job undertaking the first phase of this project, and certainly hope that commissioners are able to come out for the ribbon cutting on May 1st. Thank you.
May I just one?
Sure.
I know, I just realized that while I acknowledged and thanked the chef mentors, I was remiss in not acknowledging and thanking Anita Ho for her work with the Chef Apprentice program. I first ran into Anita, or met Anita, last year when I volunteered for the Children's Parade and Fiesta, and was impressed with her then, and was really impressed with how she's driving the Chef Apprentice program.
Thank you. And now have we come to the budget?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, we present a budget to you every year. This is the first year of a 2-year plan. Our focus is going to be mostly on 2020. We involve pretty much a good 50% of the department in putting our budget together. So recreation staff, park staff, creek staff, admin staff. For today's presentation, I will do a few slides to begin with, and we'll turn it over to Cameron Benson. He'll talk about the Creeks Division budget. I have Rich Hanna and Nicole Parmalee and Matt Parker, who are also here to walk you through our proposed budget for the next 2 years. We will be asking you to make a recommendation to council to move forward with the budget as proposed, and I'm certainly available to answer any questions or do follow-up work that you might need us to do. So with that, if I could have the next slide. So Santa Barbara Parks and Recreation is a diverse department. We have lots of things in our mission that are critical to our success: clean and safe parks, beaches, recreation facilities, enhance Santa Barbara's beauty, promote stewardship of our resources, and to provide quality recreation and cultural experiences and community services for the quality of life of all Santa Barbara residents. As I mentioned, we're going to split this presentation up. In addition to the general fund, we have the Creeks Fund through Measure B. We have the Golf Fund. And then our capital projects are held in a separate capital outlay fund for the general fund, and then Creeks and Golf also have their own funds. We have a miscellaneous grants fund, and that's where we house the work that we do with the school district, also grants and opportunities that we have come forward. When we're working with other organizations, it allows us to account for that work separate from the general fund, and also allows us to carry forward programs over multiple years in the event that a program takes a number of years to complete. When you look at our department makeup in terms of management, in addition to the administrative staff and the director and the assistant director, we have managers for recreation, parks, creeks, and the business manager works within administration but also oversees the management of our golf course contract. As you remember, we used to have a separate golf division. We still do, but it's really centered around two major contracts, and it falls to the business manager to manage those. We have 19 programs, and as I said, 4 funds. Could you go back, please? Great. Just over 90 permanent full-time equivalent staff. The 0.65 means that not everybody's full-time. And then I just point out 138,000 hourly hours. So if you divide that by 2080, which if you think is your average full-time work year, you're looking at close to 65 people. It's not 65, it's more than 65. It's staff working throughout the year in recreation, parks, but then also a lot of it in the summertime. So our department is successful because we have that huge base of seasonal staff for our programs.
Ms. Zachary, are they limited to 1,000 hours a year? So that'd be 130.
Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet, that's correct. And not all of them get to that point, but some do certainly. And we manage May and June looking at where we are with certain staff. We can't keep them on for a longer period of time. So when we look at our expenditure budget, the total expense budget for the next year is just over $25 million. Of that, the general fund represents 70%, so just under 17.5. The Creeks Fund, 4.3. Golf, 2.8, almost 2.9. And then, as I mentioned, the miscellaneous fund at 2%. When you look at our revenues, it kind of sort of splits out the same way, but general fund revenue is 43% of the revenue that comes in. We're budgeting just over $13 million in revenue. The Creeks Fund through Measure B, just under 4.3. Golf at 2.9, almost $3 million, and then miscellaneous grants basically cancels itself out, money in, money out. So it's a net budget for that. And again, when we go through the budget, you'll realize we are, when we develop our budget, both our expenses and our revenues, we're doing it based on experience, what we experienced last year, the year prior. We're doing it based on what we're projecting. So when we talk about meeting our revenue targets, we start the year saying, yes, we're going to generate $5.6 million in revenue, and we spend a lot of time throughout the year making sure that actually happens. Because if we don't generate the revenue, certainly in the general fund and the golf fund, then we have to start looking at trimming our programs and services, which we avoid to the extent possible at all times. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Cameron, and he will walk you through the Creeks Fund budget proposal.
Thank you, Jill. Madam Chair and Commissioners, my name is Cameron Benson. I'm the Creeks Division Manager, and this afternoon I'll be presenting the proposed Creeks Fund budget for fiscal years 2020 and 2021. As Jill mentioned, we'll focus on the fiscal year 2020 numbers. Almost all of the revenue or funding for the Creeks Division comes from Measure B, which is a voter-approved hotel bed tax. 2% hotel bed tax was approved in November of 2000. The money goes into a special fund, and the use of that fund is restricted to improve the quality of stormwater and other surface waters, and to carry out creek restoration improvements throughout the city. I should note that the Creeks Division receives no money from the general fund, and also when we look at our revenues and forecast our revenues, we do not include potential grant funding just simply because it's too speculative. So getting into the numbers, I'll start with our revenues projected for FY 2020. The Finance Department forecasts what the hotel bed tax revenues are going to be. So as you look across the top line numbers, that's our Measure B funds, starting with our adopted budget for the current fiscal year, FY19, at just under $4 million. And you can see that for FY 2020, it says a recommended budget. That's the Finance Department forecast, just over $4 million. The mid-year projection for the current year is slightly lower than the adopted budget. That happens sometimes. So our forecasted change at 3.2% is the revenue forecast for 2020 compared to the mid-year forecast for FY19. It's actually very close to what our forecasted revenues were for the current fiscal year. Interest income is forecast to go up slightly. Those numbers are small, so 11% looks like a lot, but it's not a lot of money. Miscellaneous is funding that we receive from other agencies who we share costs for some of our public outreach. So overall, our revenues are fairly flat, with a slight increase projected year over year for the current fiscal year. Our expenditures for FY 2020 are also basically flat. You can see we have small increases in salaries and benefits line item. When you look at the second to last column to the right, it looks like our supply and services costs are going down fairly significantly. That's from our revised budget, but from our adopted budget, you can see we're within $5,000 on a $1 million budget for supplies and services, which includes everything from water quality lab costs to trash cleanup in the creeks to maintenance for our restoration projects. So really broad range of programs. Other costs remain basically the same from the current year budget. And then one big difference to point out is the transfer to capital. So that's the second to last row from the bottom. You can see our FY 2020 recommended transfer to our capital program is about $350,000 less than the current fiscal year. That just is a change that we see from year to year. But the change looks really large when you look at the change from our revised budget at $1,550,000. And the reason for that is we had a $1.2 million transfer. It was a one-time transfer in the current fiscal year for a property acquisition along a creek. One other thing I'll point out is that our expense budget for FY 2020 at $4,353,000 or almost $354,000 is slightly more than our revenue budget. So we're looking at moving approximately $60,000 from our reserve fund to balance a budget. That's fairly common in the Creeks Division budget. And just to give an example, in the current fiscal year budget, we moved over $450,000 from our reserve into our to balance our budget. So this year is fairly close to balanced. I'll talk a little more about the reserve and the reserve balance in a minute. This chart shows the division of expenses for our operating fund by program area. So our Creeks Advisory Committee a long time ago was really interested in what percentage of the Measure B funds were going to different components of the Creeks Division programs. We really have three programs: our water quality program, creek restoration, and then community outreach for water quality and restoration. And the guidance we received from our advisory committee was spend approximately half the money on water quality efforts, about a quarter of it on creek restoration, and about a quarter on community outreach. And so in the current fiscal year, in the FY 2020 proposed budget, we're pretty close to those numbers, 51% water quality, 26% for creek restoration, 23% community outreach. I do often get questions from people about why is community outreach such a big part of the budget? Why is it so important? And the answer to that is that like most cities in the United States or around the world, the number one water pollution problem that we have in Santa Barbara is essentially urban runoff. And so we are all part of that problem, that just living here. And so our outreach is incredibly important. If we're going to address that problem, everyone needs to understand what the problem is and that they're part of it so that they can be part of the solution. So it's a very important part of our program. So just to recap a few budget highlights, our projected Measure B revenues are slightly higher than the adopted FY19 budget, about $50,000. Our capital improvement program for FY 2020, the transfer will drop by $350,000, and that changes year to year. FY 2021, it bumps right back up to a similar number. We have a slight increase in some of our water quality monitoring. We're doing some additional analysis of some stormwater BMPs to determine the effectiveness of different types of stormwater BMPs. And then we have a $65,000 transfer from reserves to balance the budget. The Creeks Fund capital program is a significant portion of the work the Creeks Division does. It consumes the largest percentage of our annual budget from year to year. These are the projects that we are proposing funding for in the FY20 and 21 budgets. They should all look familiar. They have all been funded in prior years' budgets for the Creeks Division. Many of you are familiar with a lot of these projects. I don't need to go into detail about all of them, but I would like to point out or pull out a couple of them to talk about. The first one on the list, stormwater treatment retrofit projects. We're proposing $150,000 for this year. This is a fund that we use to do pilot projects for throughout the city for to test out different ways to build an urban environment in a more water quality friendly way. So we've done parking lot and alley and street and sidewalk permeable paver replacement projects to test those types of materials in those areas. In the upcoming fiscal year, we are working with the Parks Division as part of the department's improvements in Bonnet Park to add some stormwater improvement for that neighborhood and for Old Mission Creek. We're going to be putting infiltration chambers underneath the turf area in the park, and we will have sufficient capacity to catch all of the water from a 6-acre area surrounding the park in a 1-inch storm. All of the water will be able to be captured and infiltrated underneath the field and eventually make its way into Old Mission Creek and back into Mission Creek. The third one on the list, the Arroyo Burro open space restoration. That's the open space at the end of Allen Road. The city acquired that property in 2013, and we just completed phase 1, which was a creek restoration along Arroyo Burro in that open space area. Jill mentioned we have ribbon cutting for that restoration project next Wednesday, 10 o'clock. You're all invited, and we'd love to see you there. We are about to begin phase 2 of that project, which will be some restoration of the tributary that goes up Campanile Hill out of that park, as well as some trail improvements and other access improvements in the park. Let's see, I had 2 more. Arroyo Burro restoration at Palermo Drive, the 4th one on the list. That's the property acquisition that I mentioned earlier. That is in the Hidden Valley neighborhood at the end of Palermo Drive. The city is in escrow right now to purchase about 5.5 acres adjacent to Arroyo Burro. And in FY 2020, we we'll begin our outreach and planning and preliminary design work for a creek restoration project in that location. And then lastly, I wanted to give you a quick update on the Andre Clark Bird Refuge. We are working on a water quality improvement and habitat restoration project for that area. It's really some incremental steps, but we are moving forward with a project there. We have approximately 30% design complete for a project, and we will be moving into kind of our permitting and environmental review phase of the project, which for that project is huge. I think we have 7 permitting agencies in addition to the city permits that we need to move that project forward. We have endangered species. We have lots of sensitive natural resources. So it really gets a close look from all of the resource protection agencies. So that's what we'll be working on there for in the next fiscal year. This slide demonstrates this is focused on our capital program funding and the comparison to the use of Measure B funds with grant funding. So the blue portion of the bars in this graph are the Measure B contribution to our capital program, and the purplish colored color on the graph is the grant funding that we received in that particular fiscal year. And this is a nice slide because it shows our ability to leverage those Measure B dollars with grant funding. It also shows that in many years we actually have more money coming in through grants than we provide to our capital program through the Measure B funding. And even in some years, like FY13, we actually received more money in grant funding than we did from the entire Measure B revenue coming in. So FY19, the current year, I just want to point out we just last week received notification that we received a grant, a $500,000 grant through the California River Parkways grant program to go towards the acquisition of that property at Palermo Drive. I'm hoping, and it is possible, that bar could still grow. We've still got a month or 2 months left in the fiscal year. We do the Creeks Division staff. I'm very proud of all of them. We work really hard to identify and apply for grants that might be able to help us leverage the Measure B dollars. And over the life of the Creeks Division, or since 2002, we've received over $20 million in grant funding. Creeks Fund reserves. The Creeks Fund has its own reserve. The purpose of the reserve is to be available for capital projects, for grant matches, or to help us out in difficult economic years like the recession. The Creeks Advisory Committee recommendation for the Creeks Fund reserve balance is $3 million. We are looking to end FY19 at just around $2 million. We'll be just over $2 million. The reason that we're below the target amount is because we transferred $1.2 million out of the reserve this year for that property acquisition. As I mentioned, we just received the notice of the California River Parkways grant. That's $500,000. So because we took that money out of reserves, that grant money is going to come back in, and it's going to allow us to not take that money out of reserve. So that will increase our balance. Again, if we will have 2 more grant applications in for that project, so that has the ability to increase there. We have a little. We're proposing to use approximately $60,000 from the reserve in FY 2020 and $320,000 in FY 2021, which will leave us with a reserve balance at the end of FY 2021 just over $2 million. A couple of our performance measures for FY 2020, we will produce an annual water quality report that will be available on our website and available to the public. We're, as I mentioned, acquiring property for the Arroyo Burrow Restoration Project at Palermo Drive. We will complete construction of the stormwater treatment project in Bonnet Park as part of the larger park improvement project. And we, as part of our outreach program, we provide watershed education programs to over 3,000 school-age children in Santa Barbara through a voluntary watershed education program. Last week, on April 17th, our Creeks Advisory Committee met. We went over the proposed budget, and the committee unanimously recommended approval of the proposed FY 2021 budget to the Commission and to City Council. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, we thought we could do the Creeks Division. You're welcome to make a recommendation on the budget at this time, or you could take it all together at the end of your meeting. It's really up to you.
I think it makes sense to do the Creeks now.
I think
Well,
so.
it's fresh in our mind.
And I would just like to say how blessed we are in this community to have Measure B funding, to have you and your staff taking care of the Measure B money, and the committee, the Creeks Committee. I know over the years their involvement in the budget is extreme. You know, they really keep an eye, and I appreciate that. We wouldn't have gotten nearly the grant money had we not had the Measure B money to back it up. So we are a lucky community, and I think we've made progress in water quality issues. So thank you. I would recommend that we accept this budget and recommend it to council. It's a motion.
Any discussion?
Well, I just had a question.
Oh, please, please.
A couple questions. I mean, I'm not going to argue with the budget recommendation, but I am curious, though, how the reserve levels are determined, because it's just sort of in with my old business person hat on. Carrying that level of reserve seems very high. It struck me last year, and I didn't ask about it. And then the other question I had, really, when I look at, I don't know, what would it take to make a step change? So, for example, the storm water retrofit projects, what would it take to scale those up? And would that be the most significant step change that we could make in this community? It's a bit open-ended, and I apologize.
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, I'll answer the reserve question and then ask Cameron to take your other question. The city has a policy reserve requirement of 25%, of which 15% are disaster reserves and 10% are economic reserves, or it's the other way around. At any rate, so no matter what fund we're talking about, whether it's the general fund, the Creeks Fund, the Gulf Fund, water fund, wastewater fund, that reserve requirement is a city council policy.
Madam Chair and Commissioner McGill, and with the Creeks Fund Reserve, the Creeks Advisory Committee years ago identified a reserve balance, and the target was based on being able to complete 2 medium, large-scale capital improvement projects. So if some opportunity presented itself, the committee wanted to have the ability for us to seize on that opportunity. In the case of, for example, Creekside property becomes available, as we had happen recently, the Creeks Fund has the ability to react to that quickly, and so that's our target. So, to do a large project, $1.5 million. So that's why we're looking at $3 million, and they do recognize that relative to the size of our annual budget and our program, that is a high dollar amount. With regard to the stormwater retrofit projects, the goal of Measure B, when Measure B was passed, was not to retrofit or rebuild the infrastructure of the city of Santa Barbara. That's a different department, and so what that particular capital project item does is it attempts to to construct things in a different way as a demonstration project for a way that private and public projects could go forward. And really it's a learning process for all of us at the city. So we didn't know when we first used permeable pavers in a parking lot how that would work, particularly in support of large vehicles like trash trucks and fire trucks and things like that, and wanted to make sure that the engineering was sound. So we installed our first paver project at Mackenzie Park in the parking lot there, and we're able to learn a lot from that as we went forward. And ultimately, we were able to install them in a city street. And we're still in a process of evaluating that, and that involves the impact, not just the water quality impacts, but there are impacts or benefits to street trees and aesthetic impacts and their heat island effect impacts. So we're still evaluating all of those, and also looking at the cost benefit of using those types of materials versus traditional materials.
And by just a follow-up, the real reason I query the reserve is when I think about with something like creeks, it's kind of like, gosh, it's great, and you'd love to get there faster. If the reserve was lower, would that make a material impact on what you were able to do on an annual basis? And over time, would that have been the right decision?
Madam Chair and Commissioner McGill, that's a good question. What we see with the reserve is it doesn't. It's not just piling up there. We have a target, and we try to keep close to that target. And as you can see, we had an opportunity come up that's put us for the first time really in many years where we're in a position where we're proposing a budget that doesn't keep us at that targeted reserve balance. We're dipping down below it. And to me, that indicates that we're making use of the funds, and we're making use of the reserve in the way it was envisioned, I think, by our advisory committee.
And I guess my request would be that become an active, that kind of question become an active part of the conversation on the level of the reserve.
So I think we left that with, we had a motion on the table and it was seconded. Is that correct?
I'll second if it wasn't.
It was.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Clark and Commissioners. Rich Hanna, Assistant Parks and Recreation Director. I'm going to take you through the general fund presentation tonight. This first slide is a good intro to the general fund. It really kind of sets the stage for the breadth of the department's assets and infrastructure. I'm going to just call out a couple of things. It calls out the number of acres of parkland that we maintain through the Parks Division. It talks about the number of recreation assets and facilities that we have across the department to provide recreation opportunities. And it also talks about the breadth of the street, park, and open space tree program as well. I would be remiss if I didn't say, as we were going through this first slide, we were just before you with a master plan talking about adding more recreation facilities. And I just wanted to call out, we've got a variety of facilities up here that you're looking at, but we really only have one year-round swimming pool. We have one soccer field, we have one gym, and we have one skate park. So we kind of touch every part of the recreation community here in Santa Barbara, but we don't have enough of the resources to provide that year-round for the community's benefit. Diving a little bit into the programs and services for the general fund, and I realize this is probably recreation heavy. We process over 10,000 activity registrations every year. We serve over 2,100 kids in our after-school programs. That's our recreation after-school program that we run on the school district campuses, our support of the AOK program, and also our free youth sports programs. We process over 11,000 park and facility reservations, and that can be everything from an indoor or outdoor wedding reception, public, private gathering, a picnic rental, all falls into that category. We process over 125 community special events. The department plays the lead role for the entire city for processing all major large sporting events, community events, and festivals. We serve over 10,000 households through the weekly free meal and food distribution programs. And then in addition to that, we also have 34,000 plus volunteer hours. And that's made up of time that the commission spends here on once a month at meetings, our other advisory committees, our volunteers for extravaganza, the food distribution programs, and really kind of help the staff deliver the programs and services for this community that we couldn't do without their help. Just wanted to walk you through a couple of the key initiatives for the department as we go into this next 2-year budget phase. The first is planning for the Cabrillo Pavilion opening. It's coming. So before it opens, we have to develop that operational plan. What are the programs and services going to be that we operate at that facility, and how do we make it available to the community? And we'll talk a little bit about that later in the presentation. We also need to look at developing new recreation programming. I think every year it's incumbent upon the Recreation Division to step back, look at what the trends are out in the community. Can we actually bring that program here and offer it? Do we need to modify something that we've been doing year in, year out to make it exciting again? And so every once in a while, we just want to kind of peel back the layers and look at how can we make what we do better or bring in something that's new and remain competitive with other service providers in the community. In terms of increasing marketing and brand identity, I think with so much competition in this community, we really need to focus on improving our marketing, the messages that we're pushing out, reminding people that we are the Parks and Recreation Department and we are the service provider for youth and adult programs inside the community. So we're going to take a key look at that and focus on pushing messages out to remind people about those programs and services as we go through the next 2-year budget process. Improving internal Perfect Mind efficiencies. The Perfect Mind system actually is great from the user interface. Internally, there's some things that we need Perfect Mind to fix for the staff. So we spend a lot of time on the back end doing application processing, pulling reports and data that we thought we would have that information kind of as a boilerplate template. So from the customer's perspective, using Perfect Mind, it's a great interface, it's lively, it's a great way to register your kids. The back-end effort for us right now as staff takes more time than we like. We'd like to be able to improve those efficiencies so we can actually redirect those resources to other parts of the department. And then strategically addressing the minimum wage increases in compaction. And this is really addressed at our ability to maintain or retain existing staff, be actively recruiting new staff to come in and match what our competition is doing in the community so we can continue to provide our programs and services. In addition to those key initiatives, given some recent studies that have come out, we'll be looking to proactively review and update the IPM and Fair Zone strategies as necessary, so we'll be undertaking that. The Commission will receive the 2018 IPM program report somewhere in the next couple of months at one of your meetings, and we envision that this will be a key initiative that we take forward as we go through the Commission, the Council, and then prepare for the report for the subsequent year. And then advance the existing capital and planning projects, the Ortega Park and Dwight Murphy master plans, the West Beach Splash Playground, and the Bonet Park renovation projects. So some of the big cost increases the department is experiencing as we go into this first of the 2-year budget phase is water. Just as a reminder, the drought has kind of ended. We're supposedly out of the drought. The rates have not gone down as the water level has come back up. And so as a department, especially when we have so much park space to irrigate, we're going to be challenged with that. So as we go forward, we won't be able to exceed the water use rates that we were applying back in 2013 with the 30% reduction that we had to achieve during the drought. So I think some of the messaging and the marketing we may be working on too is we're out of the drought. Why are some of our fields starting to look crispy as we come out of summer? And really the main area here is we just can't afford to put that much more water down if it's not a normal rain year. The $44,000 is a 7% increase over fiscal year 2019. We've budgeted $20,000 of that, and we're really going to kind of hedge our bets and say we're expecting normal rain years as we move forward. Or if we don't get that rain, we'll look at other ways within the department to meet that challenge, that extra $24,000 that's required. The vehicle fuel, Matt Parker, the parks manager, came on. His first assignment was, why are we spending so much money on vehicle fuel in the current fiscal year? Fuel rates have gone up, and it was what we haven't increased the number of vehicles in our fleet in terms of providing all the programs and services and maintenance across the city. We did a deeper dive. We figured out it's about a 22% increase in fiscal year 2019. So we've applied that to the fiscal year 20 rationale. So you'll see increases primarily in parks operations, but also in recreation where we use vans and vehicles to move kids in the summer and after-school programs. And then the minimum wage. And so as the minimum wage increases, council has forgiven departments as the rate increases to the minimum wage. So anybody that's below the minimum wage as of $13 January 1, 2020 will be raised to $13, and the council provides that amount of money. So that the $73,000 or $74,000 you see there, the department's forgiven for that increase. What it does not address is the compaction issue. So when you get to 2020, January 2020, and the minimum wage is $13 per hour, all of our pool lifeguards and a lot of our camp staff that are currently making $12.90 or $13.10 will all of a sudden be at the minimum wage, along with a youth apprentice that we bring in who's really getting job experience on the job with the hope of introducing them into the workforce. So as a department, we'll be spending a good part of fiscal year 20 looking at that analysis, looking at where we need to address compaction and how do we remain competitive to provide our programs and services. Some of the major budget challenges moving forward. As I mentioned earlier, the Cabrillo Pavilion is scheduled to open October 2019. We also anticipate the restaurant coming online. That's been one of our key goals, is to bring the entire facility online at the same time. If anything slips with the restaurant concession, the building is still scheduled to open as planned. Some of the key considerations related to the Cabrillo Pavilion, we're proposing new operating hours, and that has some operating considerations. We'll be operating the facility 7 days a week, and when we looked at expanding the hours of service, previously the facility only was open Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. So no weekends. So now we're going to move to a 7-day-week operation so the community has full access to this renovated facility. And in doing that, we've expanded the hours, and we're actually proposing having the facility be open as early as 6 a.m. Monday through Friday and closing at 8 p.m. on weekdays, and 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekends. So again, more access to the community and hopefully more programs and services for people to participate in. So as we expand those to a 7-day and add those hours, there's obviously higher hourly costs you'll see in some budgets. And that's really, you're seeing that in the facilities and special events budget and some of the aquatic section budget, because we just don't have enough permanent staff to cover those extra hours. So we'll be, using hourly staff with permanent staff to kind of hedge our way through a typical work week. So that's one of the things that we're considering as we go into this. The programming and service opportunities, we've got an enhanced upper event space. We've got a beach level conference room, a multi-purpose room for new programming on the beach level, a fitness room that we're looking to find a fitness provider to work with us to provide group training, where they would actually lease that space. But in doing that, work with the department and the city, so there's opportunities for the community to drop in and pay and use it like a regular gym as it was prior to the renovation. So really kind of walk that line between maximizing community recreation and fitness, but also you could still drop in there at various times in the day and work out. And so that's how the models come together for that. And then, of course, the state-of-the-art shower and locker rooms. So that's the programming and service opportunities we're looking to expand as we go forward. Along with that, there's a need to maintain the facility at a level that represents the investment that was just put into renovating it. So over and above the city's standard custodial, we envision and we've budgeted for increased custodial costs. So that's increased cleaning throughout the day in some of the interior locker rooms, the fitness room, and the exterior restrooms. We're looking at a security service that's not on site, but comes by the facility frequently throughout the day and at night also to move people on that happen to be in the area that shouldn't be in the area. And I'll step back. A big part of this facility, by expanding the hours and a lot of the lighting and the way that it's being designed, is to really discourage misuse and activities that are there. And by bringing more people to the area, we're hoping to achieve that. But just to kind of add and complement that, we're looking at adding some sort of a security service to be there, so it's not incumbent on staff to always have to be the person that goes outside the facility and asks people to move along that shouldn't be there for those reasons. And then we've got some new landscaping there, and again, that's in addition to the existing landscape and the park acreage our Parks Division currently maintains, so we've pulled in some costs to actually maintain the landscaping at the Cabrillo Pavilion when it reopens. And then obviously any revenue that's generated from this will continue to go back into the facility so we can maintain it. Our facilities maintenance department look at a facility in a way that if you turn it upside down and you shake it, everything that falls out would be on the department. They're responsible for maintaining everything that doesn't fall out. They also have a model on how long things should go before they're replaced or maintained. And you can imagine a high rental upstairs facility or a high impacted fitness facility. We probably want that to be maintained at a much more frequent rate so that it continues to provide that facility or that experience to the community. And we're going to need to be able to pay for those costs from the revenue that we generate from the facility.
I have a question. Years ago, we talked about taking a portion of, let's say, the rental fees and keeping them back for maintenance of that facility solely. Is that impractical, or is that something we can look to do?
Chair Clark, Commissioner Longstreet, we would like to get to that point, and we do talk about the need for the department, city organization to really continue to reinvest in this facility and make sure that we're providing it in the best condition to the public. We haven't broached that on a programmatic basis or a policy basis. We need to get a couple of years of operations under our belt. And there's chances are there will be things that we will want to do that we will need funds for that we haven't anticipated yet today. So it's in the works conceptually. When we would get there is yet to be determined.
And I have another question about security. Is this something where we would be looking at it being a cost analysis of a park ranger that we can utilize in very many ways versus a separate security firm, or?
So Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet, we actually did quite a bit of analysis on this. We looked at using a park ranger that could be dedicated to that area that also then kind of managed the beachfront experience. Later tonight, you're going to receive a presentation just in terms of the misuse we have across our entire park and city infrastructure that the department maintains. And we didn't really feel that tying a percentage of a park ranger's time to that location was going to be the best use of that, versus maybe having an additional park ranger to kind of serve the greater good. What this security service ultimately does is they'll come in, periodically through the night, move people along that shouldn't be there. They look the part. They look like a park ranger. Our park rangers aren't sworn, so they don't carry any guns, but they'll have the ability to move folks along, and then periodically through the day come through, check in with staff, check in with the restaurant operators, and just move people through the area. We also looked at having a dedicated security officer remain on site during all operational hours, and the cost to do that frankly, it just didn't seem feasible, and I don't know that we would get anything more from that. So by doing the security service, although they're not going to be maybe so dedicated to other parts of the department operations, they will be dedicated to coming to that facility and moving along issues that staff are encountering. So we'll have a schedule that they come in, we can augment that schedule, and then there's a call-in fee if staff are having a problem. That same call-in would also go out to our park ranger service or the police department if it's something that's escalating.
I think it's something in the city that we really do, I know they're keeping track of it downtown. Your report on our parks gave us a lot to chew on. It's a big issue, and I hate to see it impact our Parks and Recreation budget the way it does, so thank you. So
just to kind of encapsulate those operational and expenditure changes for the Cabrillo Pavilion. We're looking at, and this is the full revenue that's generated, a little over $500,000 in fiscal year 20, closer to $900,000 in fiscal year 21. The expenditures, again, almost $800,000 in fiscal year 20 and just over $900,000 in fiscal year 21. I would say that this is not above status quo. So when we were given our fiscal year 20 budget, we were given the same targets we had prior to the closure. And so if you really want to look at what the building's going to do over and above what we closed, first year we're projecting a little over $140,000 more in revenue, and in the second year $450,000 more in revenue, and expenditures going from $11,600 more to almost $87,000 in fiscal year 21. The biggest difference between fiscal year 20 and 21 is we won't have the key summer months for our rentals and our summer programming. It's the first year we open. So fiscal year 21, we'll have, July, August, and September to actually book those rentals, have those events, those community gatherings, the special events, and all that programming. And that's why you see such a big disparity between fiscal year 20 and 21. Just want to talk a little bit about some of the personnel changes inside the general fund. This might be one of the least changes we've had at Commission in a long time as part of our budget. We're only proposing 3 changes. Every year we look at how the department operates, where we need to redistribute workload and anticipate future needs. One of those, we had a full-time recreation specialist at Career Recreation Center. They were focused on programming and facility rentals at that site. That person has since moved on to another job out of the area, relocated with their family. We kind of stepped back and we looked at what's really the need for the department moving forward. And we felt that the position was more reflective of a recreation coordinator that can work more independently and can go out and negotiate and bring in more programs and activities. This position will not only just serve the Career Recreation Center, we'll actually be counting on this person to actually drive and bring in new programming for the multi-purpose room at the Cabrillo Pavilion once it's renovated, and also take a lead role in developing more, I'm going to say, active adult and senior programming at the Davis Center. So the focus for this is going to be more on bringing in classes and activities to provide more offerings to the community and less about the rental component of the Cabrillo or the Career Recreation Center, which we're going to have our facilities staff pick up that major component. We're also proposing to increase our tennis specialist from 0.8 to 1.0. You've heard it a bazillion times. We brought in pickleball. It has exploded. And in addition with the sport, the demands on the recreation specialist to appease the pickleball players has exploded too. But I'd also add that, tennis has actually grown under Nance Wheeler tremendously. She's really brought a culture of welcoming to the tennis facility over there, the new playground that's there. Her swim and tennis camp that she offers in the summertime has grown exponentially in the last 3 years. And so having somebody that's really only 32 hours a week instead of 40, they're not there at their typical 9 o'clock in the morning. They don't start till 11. So you miss all these people and have that interface and a lot of the programming desires. And then to accommodate these changes, we're proposing to eliminate a half-time recreation specialist. This person was also housed in the Career Recreation Center, and out of that 0.5 time, they're 20 hours a week. I would say 85% of that time was to support the arts and craft show. And so one of the other jobs that the recreation coordinator and the senior recreation supervisor at Career Recreation Center will focus on is continuing to provide the support to the arts and craft show advisory committee, but also spend less time of our coordinator going out and bringing in new programming, which we really need to continue to advance our mission forward. So how that looks on paper, that's, basically there's no changes for the administration going forward. Recreation, you're seeing we'll have a 0.3 savings because of the 0.5 elimination of the specialist. We only need 0.2 of that to make the full-time position. And then Parks is pretty much status quo from revised. I think the biggest change you might notice is in Parks in fiscal year 2018, we were still overstaffing from the absorption of staff from the golf course. We were able to absorb them into our regular operating costs as part of fiscal year 19 when we had some vacancies, so we're no longer overstaffing the Parks division. Just to walk you through the general fund expenses by category, again, minimal changes as Cameron had experienced before. We've got some increases to salaries and benefits. Our supplies and services are going up just below 1%. Our allocated costs, those are the things we don't control. That's the custodial, the planned maintenance, the building maintenance, our vehicle lease rates, things like that. We don't really have any control over. That's going up 3%, and that's about what it does year on year on average. Special projects, a slight decrease there. Transfer outs is just really money that we transfer out every year. The biggest one in this category would be our AOK program. We're a third-party provider for the school district, and then equipment. So really not a significant change for the general fund in fiscal year 20. And then just by division, again, it just kind of brings it down to another granular level, slight increase in the administration budget, slight decrease by 1% in parks, and then recreation, as I mentioned earlier, with the Cabrillo Pavilion coming online, we will have more expenses as it's related to that. And you'll see the revenue projections shortly after this. So one of the things that I wanted to dive into just a little bit, and it may give you something to think about as we go into the misuse report later tonight, is, you know, out of the almost $8 million Parks Division budget, where are we spending that money, and what's really left for what I would consider general park maintenance and operations? So if you look at this, we have a series of contracts, and so we have a waterfront parking lot landscape contract. We're contracted with Public Works to manage the Sheffield open space. We receive funding from through the UUT program for our streets, which is strictly contract work. We have a contract with the school district for park ranger services, and we also receive UUT funding for our medians and parkways. And so when you take all of these contract type operations that we perform, money in, money out, and contract services, it really dwindles that number from almost $8 million down to closer to $6 million that we really spend in the park infrastructure. And I'm sure if we boiled that down further and you really got down into the granular detail, the number of people that are out doing the actual work, it would be less than that also. So general fund by budget for revenue, just kind of going through where we kind of generate most of our funds. The intra-city service, those are the funds that we receive for providing those contracts. The leases are usually our community center leases for nonprofits and other service providers. Parks service fees are a lot of our smaller permit fees, but also for our tree permits. Recreation programming fees making up 34%. Facility rentals making up 23%, and the restaurant concessions really making up that remaining 4%. So you get a sense that most of the revenue that comes in through the city or into the department from the city is either through recreation programming fees, facility rentals, or intra-city services. And then by division, again, just breaking it down to a more granular level, we're not expecting any change in the administration budget. The parks budget will actually go down slightly, 0.2%. And that's because there's a small decline in the UUT revenue for street trees in fiscal year 20. And then in recreation, we are expecting revenue to increase. And again, that's primarily tied to the Cabrillo Pavilion, but I did want to highlight a couple of other programs. We have expanded our recreation after-school program. We used to have a pretty long waiting list. We've been able to accommodate that waiting list at our 4 school sites and add staff, so it's actually cost neutral. So we're actually serving more kids at no additional cost, but it does bring in additional revenue. I mentioned our tennis programs bringing in additional revenue. The Carousel House is finally kind of, you know, it was a new thing for the community, and everybody that has an event there now wants to rent it for their subsequent event. So that's generating more revenue. And then the benefit of the Cabrillo Pavilion being closed for a renovation, if there is one, is that a lot of people moved their events to Chase Palm Park Center and have reinvigorated that building and found it a great place to be and use for what I would say is smaller meetings. And we've actually seen a rebirth in the use of that facility. If you took that same meeting space and you had it in the Cabrillo Pavilion in the large event room, it just always felt vacant and kind of airy and really didn't feel like you were connected to your meeting participants. And so I feel like we'll be able to backfill with other types of uses in the Cabrillo Pavilion while continuing to maintain that rental capacity both at Chase Palm Park Center. Again, I touched on this on the slides earlier, but just the bulk of the parks revenue of the just under $1.5 million comes through a lot of our contract work that I talked about earlier. Recreation revenue, just to break it down into some of the division areas, the facility rentals and special events, that's the beachfront park sites and permits, including our special event permits. The youth activities, generating money from after-school programs, summer programs, and then our inclusion programs and services. Aquatics, the Los Baños swimming pool, Cabrillo Pavilion, summer camp, swim programs, and lifeguard services. And as we bring on the Cabrillo Pavilion, we've been conscientious about which costs we put in each budget, because we'll have facilities and special events have a role in the Cabrillo Pavilion, as does the aquatic section. They were both programs that operated out of there previously, almost in a silo, and now they're going to be operating very close together. So we said anything that's a facility that is just lights on, operational, we're going to leave that in facilities and special events. And aquatics will pick up either revenues or expenditures related to the fitness room, the locker rooms, and things like that. So we have a clear delineation moving forward in terms of where the money's going and where the expenditures are going, but a general understanding that all staff that are assigned there have multiple responsibilities to make this the place to go. Also moving through the rest of the recreation revenue, sports and tennis. So we give all of our youth sport programs for free. So the rest of that revenue does come in through other youth programs, schools that want to participate in our youth sports leagues that are not part of the joint use agreement with the school district. Our adult sport leagues are thriving. Our basketball, volleyball, beach volleyball, indoor and outdoor flag football, permits and camps. In our active adults program, classes, rentals, at the Carrillo Recreation Center and the Carrillo Gym. And then in our neighborhood outreach services, most of the revenue is generated through youth programs, nonprofit leases, and facility rentals. So fees and charges, I would say that every year staff take a really deep dive into fees and charges and really look at what the community is providing. How can we remain competitive? We have 160 recreation program and facility fee areas, which make up over 700 individual fees. Moving forward, we're proposing to bring on 22 new fees, discontinue 4, eliminate and modify 22, and we're doing moderate increases, decreases, and that's in the 2 to 3% range for about 60 of our fees. And as I mentioned, we look at fee considerations and we're looking to standardize. So this year, one of the major fee considerations is we wanted to standardize the nonprofit facility rental rates. So we've got a resident rate and a non-resident rate for our facility rentals, and then we had nonprofit, resident, non-resident facility rental rates. And we just wanted to standardize that as 20% across the norm, because really most of the nonprofits we're serving are in the community, and it just makes it easier between the facilities in the beachfront, the Carrillo Recreation Center, and neighborhood centers. So we just decided to standardize all nonprofit facility rental rates as 20% below the resident rental rate. So that was one of the major considerations this year. We're also looking, when we do fee considerations, cost recovery, ways of maximizing participation, who our target market is, and then obviously who our competition is in the community. So when we look at some of our fee changes, what we like to do for commission is we try to pull out fees that are a little outside of that minor increase, just so that you can see where we're looking. So again, I talked briefly about the nonprofit facility rental. This is again to realign the 20% below discount for the rental fees. Our indoor-outdoor facility rental fees are going up 2%. We believe we can accommodate that comfortably. We have a huge demand for our picnic areas and our outdoor facility areas. Our sports field rental fees are going up 7%, and really the justification for that is we need to do more turf renovation so they have places to play. And with the water cost increase also, we just wanted to increase that more than a typical 2 to 3%. Our annual tennis permits are going up 3 to 5%. It's the first time in a long time we've actually raised tennis permits, because we really, at one point, were looking at a significant decline in tennis. We feel that it's leveled off, and really when you look at a small increase like this, 3 to 5%, you're talking somewhere between $1 to $2 on an annual permit. So it's significant, not a significant amount for somebody that plays out there 5 days a week. The annual pickleball permit fees, I had some heartburn about this, The pickleball community supported this. They, you know, when we brought pickleball on, a lot of communities don't charge anything. And we partnered to create 4 pickleball courts. Since that time, we now have 8 dedicated pickleball courts, and we just put blended lines on another court at Municipal, meaning you can still have a tennis tournament there and meet all the sanctions and the rules that you have to have, but now we've got 4 more temporary pickleball courts there. So as it's grown, we're starting to realize when we go to rehab these facilities and do all of our paving, we're going to have to pay for those things. And so we've been working a lot with the pickleball community. We've proposed these fee increases. They're comfortable with what we're proposing in these increases, and they're still about 50% below what the annual tennis permit fee costs. Career Recreation Center classes, we're proposing 3 to 5%. Annual Arts and Crafts Show membership, 3%. This was actually supported by the Arts and Crafts Show at one of their recent meetings. And this is really just tied to the hourly costs because we always have an event monitor there as we're dealing with compaction and increases. We just want to make sure we can offset that. And then historically, every year we increase our nonprofit lease rates by about 2%. So getting into the Cabrillo Pavilion fees is a little more difficult. So what we've come up with is a fee schedule that we feel still makes the facility available to the community, which was one of our key goals as we went through this. And as we've gone through this, we went through and we spent a lot of time looking at what would we charge for a second floor special event space. So staff went out and looked at over 30 facilities in the community that of similar size, meaning they can serve somewhere around 200 people. It's an indoor facility. And looked at what they provide, and a lot of places actually provide the event space, the monitor. It's kind of a one-stop package fee. And we've priced ourselves for a Saturday, which is really our peak time at that building. We kind of sell every Saturday every year in the previously renovated facility. So we feel like we can rent every facility every Saturday coming out with a renovated facility. This still puts us somewhere to the tune of $1,000 to $1,200 below our competition. And you still get to bring in your own food, DJ, alcohol, and all those things that if you were going to rent a facility of this size somewhere else in the community, you'd be tied to all of their costs as it's associated. We wanted to have a slightly lower rate for our Fridays and Sundays. We feel there's an opportunity to rent those. This is actually well below the competition, but in line with what we see smaller facilities generate on the kind of the shoulder times. And then what I feel is pretty much a reasonable weekday rate, which converts into the Monday to Thursday rate. And again, we'll be providing the event space. We have 2 renovated terraces, chairs, tables. We'll do the setup, all the AV equipment you need. It includes the cleaning fee and the event monitor. The only thing that's not included in this fee is if you want the dance floor, it's going to cost another $100. And that's because most people don't want it, so we did not include it as part of this because we felt like people would just be like, well, I don't want the dance floor. Can you take that off? And we just felt like, well, if you want it, we'll charge you another $100. For the lower level, the ocean level multi-purpose room, we're setting these fees similar to what we have at Korea Recreation Center for our multi-purpose meeting rooms. The ocean level fitness room, we went out and we did this as part of the restaurant concession also. What's the average square footage lease rates for facilities of this size? It ranged everywhere from $1.75 to $3.75. We feel like if we can get somebody to come in to do group fitness at $2.50 per square foot, that's a revenue source that we'll have, and then the memberships will complement that. And then in terms of the memberships, one of the things that we tried to do is we tried to pick up on the model that we have at Los Baños, so we're not doing something that's different. We didn't renovate this facility and say, now if you want to come and use the facility, it's going to cost you $25 for a one-day pass. So these are pretty much in line, at least the adult fee, the $8 entry fee for what we have at Los Baños, so we feel that that's fair for the community. If you chose to purchase a pass, it's almost 50% off of that daily rate. Keeping in mind, as we've renovated this facility, it was always intended to be a recreation facility. It was never designed just to be a place for people to go and take showers or be a storage facility. And what we've noticed with the facility being closed and what we've seen at Los Baños pool is a higher daily fee or the requiring someone to purchase an actual membership pass has eliminated some of the issues that we previously had at the Cabrillo Pavilion. So these fees still make it accessible to the community that want to use it truly for recreation, but are not so high that people choose to find another location, but actually eliminate some of our concerns in terms of who should be using it and why should they be using it. In terms of the P3 program, if you remember, we did a huge overhaul of our program last year. We're really proposing just a few new measures. Most of them are around tracking methods for marketing initiatives. As I mentioned, we really need to get out there and maybe change how we're doing things. So we've got some measures in there that allow us to effectively track those initiatives and what we're seeing in terms of every initiative we deliver, what are we expecting in return. How we improve and monitor the data reporting, again, is a new measure, and then prioritizing tree planting. So we're out planting trees, as we referenced last year. We've revised measures to establish new program targets, program reorganization, and participation trends. And then new projects that we have: implement a business and marketing plan for the Cabrillo Pavilion. You know, it's there. We just have to carry it over the hurdle. Implement an annual work plan for Parma Park, complete the annual open space vegetation plan, management plan, and then complete the annual IPM report. The miscellaneous grants funds, as Jill mentioned earlier, kind of houses these programs for the general fund. So our adaptive programs, summer recreation programs, have funds that live in this that are dedicated specifically for those programs. So every time we have a dance or some sort of a bowling activity, money that's raised goes in here and it goes directly back to support the program. The summer recreation is where we receive outside grants funds that we received several years ago to expand the program. The Santa Barbara Unified School District AOK program lives in this miscellaneous grants fund, and what I would tell the commission is, since we've developed our budget, we're in negotiations with the school district to change that agreement. We are a third-party provider, essentially, meaning we go out and provide the recreation and enrichment component on the school sites. It's very difficult because we are the contract provider with our staff, but they're taking direction from a school district representative. It's kind of a messy relationship, and so we're looking to refine that so that it still works both for the school district and for the department. It basically is a wash, money in, money out. So it won't impact the number of kids that are being served in after-school programs. The school district's going to continue to operate the enrichment and recreation component. They'll attend our trainings that we already do for our RAP staff. It's just we will no longer be the service provider. Children's Fiesta Parade, Santa Barbara Arts Alliance, Youth Council, Job Apprentice Program, and the Russ Morrison Junior Golf Program also live inside the miscellaneous grants.
I understand with the AOK program, who will be serving those kids if we're no longer the service provider?
So the school district operates the AOK program, and there's on average 6 staff assigned to each of the school sites. 2 of those staff are Parks and Recreation employees that go there and just deal with the recreation component. The school district felt that it would be in their best interest to have school district employees that already report to the school district on-site director operate that recreation component. So the program is not going to change for the student or the parent. It's just the department's no longer going to play this position of sending staff over there to deliver those after-school components. So the department, as part of we have several joint use agreements with the school district. So what the department's going to do is we provide a significant amount of in-kind support to the program. So participants in the AOK still get to participate in our after-school free sports program. We provide facilities for their training. We do all their CPR first aid training for the district. And I would say most importantly, we would offer them the opportunity to come to our quarterly staff training. So any of their staff that want to come in and get up to speed on new recreation after-school programming could come and participate in our training, which we're already providing for our recreation after-school staff.
So, Commissioners, that was a very lengthy general fund presentation. We did that because it's a good opportunity for us to give you the breadth of everything that the department does in the general fund and how that turns into dollars and cents and what we're looking at from a budgetary standpoint. We have one more fund to review, but if you would like to, actually two if you include capital, ask questions about the general fund, or I'll have Nicole continue with golf and then we can wrap it up at the end.
I would like to take this separately, as we did with Creeks, if everyone's okay with that? Yes. Okay. Does anyone have questions for Mr. Hanna at this time? You always do such a good job answering.
I do have one a question on the Parks and Rec, the financial and staffing summary. Capital equipment. We go to nothing in 2020 and 2021, and I can't imagine we don't have capital equipment we need. Is that slide number? It's on G226.
I don't have that slide.
That it wasn't a large amount in past years.
Yeah, Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet, what you're looking at for this page is the entire department. So it includes both the Creeks Fund and the Golf Fund. And it could be, and I will double check and get back to you, that could be related to the Golf Fund.
That we just went down to zero?
Because we're proposing, it could be funding in other aspects.
Just got moved to a different
So
category.
I'll look into that. It's not jumping out to me, the rationale there, but that's my guess, is that it's related to golf because it's not related to general fund.
Okay. I have one quick question. Oh, Commissioner Buxton?
Thank you. Please stop me if this is inappropriate, but I'm really concerned about the youth council funding at the meetings. The staff, which did a great job, is always harping on them about needing to raise funding. And so as I'm listening to hear it saying they're in special funds, can you explain to me, because I just find it strange that the staff is hoping on the youth council to raise money, and is that a department requirement? Thank you.
So the question from Jacob is he'd like to know more about funding for the Youth Council, and I'm going to paraphrase slightly because I think you're asking what does the department do to help fund the Youth Council, and
the department require the committee to raise money, because that's the impression I'm getting at the committee meeting.
Right, yes, and do we require them to raise funds for things that they would like to do? There's a two-part answer. I'll ask Rich Hanna to do that. We do provide some funding, and then there's also part of the Youth Council process in terms of their learning and ability related to managing a budget and fundraising for things that might be beyond something that's been established as part of the program budget.
Chair Clark and Commissioner Lesnar Buxton. So the Youth Council receives staff support, which is in a financial contribution, but we always earmark about $5,000 in general fund special supplies to actually support the Youth Council for traveling to conferences, to purchase their T-shirts, and a lot of their award banquet needs and so forth. So the department actually provides $5,000 in funding to support that. As Ms. Zachary mentioned, the Youth Council have always expressed a desire to actually go out and also raise funds through these community initiatives, whether it's a calendar, whether it's a bake sale. And when you take their funds along with our funds, we're funding about the Youth Council about 50-50. So they're expected to raise somewhere around $5,000, where we're putting in $5,000 also. In addition to that, the Youth Council receives money from the Harriet Miller Endowment, which also subsidizes a lot of their event banquets, their end-of-the-year events, and so forth. So it's not we don't completely 100% subsidize the Youth Council. We very rarely subsidize any one program 100% in recreation, but we do meet them halfway, and I think in the conversations that I've had and the budget presentations that I've gone to in front of the Youth Council, they've been appreciative of how the department has increased the funding to be at 50% at the $5,000 range, and still acknowledge that they need to kind of do their part also to get to that full amount to deliver their programs and services.
Thank you for the clarification. I would found it in a lot of their meetings when they kept talking about the need to fundraise. So thank you for that clarification.
Actually, sorry.
I was just going to say, Chair Clark and Commissioner Lesnar Buxton, I'd also say I can't think of a time when we've turned down the Youth Council if they've come up a little short on their fundraising to deliver one of their community events. So we realize it is a priority for the department, so we've always found that extra bit of money somewhere along the way to make sure that they deliver a great community event.
I recently heard that the Youth Council is going to be raising money for a Drinking Responsibly PSA through Draftsman Ale House is going to be helping them with that fundraiser, which I thought was creative. Anyway.
I have just one other thing that stood out to me, and it was in aquatics. We had like almost 5,000 hourly hours less proposed. Is something changing there?
So, Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet, the biggest change is we had a vacancy in the head pool lifeguard position right as the Cabrillo Pavilion was closing for the renovation. And so the permanent salary hours was converted to hourly salary hours during the renovation closure. If you look at the position count moving forward, that 0.8 head pool lifeguard returns in fiscal year 20, and so the hourly hours have gone back to fund that position in full.
Yeah, it's just sometimes you look at those things and you think, what changed, Thank you.
Before we move on, one more question. I'm assuming that maintenance needs are going to change with a decrease in glycophosphate use. And I know you're thinking about it. Have you anticipated where the funds for the increased maintenance costs will come from?
Chair Clark and commissioners, at the staff level, as was mentioned in the budget presentation, we'll be looking at our IPM strategy and fair zone model, what we ultimately will be recommending and how we'll proceed with that recommendation and how it would change the way we have to maintain parks. Wouldn't want to respond to that today until a little bit more work's been done, and clearly we will engage the commission in that discussion regarding what our options are. I will say that way back when the program started, everybody had this great idea that we'd have lots of people come out and volunteer to pull weeds. That has yet to occur. And then also I would add that we did have a dedicated green team staff once upon a time, and those staff positions were eliminated with the economic downturn. So we're dealing with a program that came with lofty goals and resources, and some resources, and the goals aren't being met in terms of volunteerism, and the resources have declined. So lots of what we will be doing is looking at it strategically. It is a strategy. But then also, what's the right thing to do for the community? And there could be a number of ways to approach it. We want everybody to be realistic about what any changes might actually mean.
Thank you.
But to follow up on that, I think from this commission can come a recommendation. I still have concerns in the cuts we took in parks over the last 11 years. I think it's been now. And we've never gotten anywhere close to the kind of staffing that we need. And we continue to feel impacts from homelessness, misuse of our parks, from now, chemical changes. And so I think as part of our recommendation going forward, I would like to make council aware of our concerns as a commission about the condition of our parks and the needs to maintain them in a safe and attractive fashion for everyone.
Thank you. Agreed.
I think I do that every year, but
You do. Okay.
I do, but you got to have a theme.
All right, I now get to turn it over to Ms. Parmalee.
So before we go, Commissioner Perry is leaving, so can we, someone make a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the general fund budget recommendation.
Second.
Any discussion?
I would like our concerns moving forward, and that we also support the fees changes too.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Would anyone be opposed to a quick 3-minute break? Okay, recess, please. Let's recommence with our golf fund presentation. Ready? Okay.
Good evening, Chair Clark and Commissioners. My name is Nicole Parmalee, I'm Business Manager and one of the newer additions to Parks and Recreation. And I will be presenting to you the Golf Fund proposed budget for FY20 and 21. And we also have joining us Randy Shannon, who's the General Manager for Santa Barbara Golf Club, to address any more specific questions. So first, just as a reminder and an overview of the Golf Fund, it is an enterprise fund, meaning it has no general fund support, so it operates sort of as its own entity. And the mission of Santa Barbara Golf Club is that we are dedicated to providing residents and visitors an exceptional and affordable golfing experience in a friendly, inclusive environment for socializing and enjoying nature. So here you can see some budget highlights. We have a 3-pronged financial strategy. Number 1, providing excellent value for our golfers in the community. Number 2, strengthening our financial position by building reserves over time, and yet also balancing our fiscal priorities to ensure we are investing sufficient capital to support the future of the golf course. And how do we achieve this? Firstly, by providing excellent customer service and continuous improvements to the course conditions, as well as by building and maintaining significant areas of infrastructure, and also by making moderate increases to certain fees only when required. So here you can see a breakdown of where the golf course derives its revenues. So the largest component is greens fees, which makes up nearly 60% of all the revenues. And those are simply the fees that golfers pay to actually play on the course. Next, after that, we have cart fees, which is more of a discretional spend for those golfers who choose to rent a golf course. And that makes up about 17% of the revenues. And together, those two areas combined comprise about 3/4 of all of the revenue generated. And then other areas include selling merchandise, driving range, practice lessons, restaurant concessions, and that comes from the rent that the city receives from Mulligan's Cafe, and tournament banquet sales of food and beverages. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see this line chart that shows how greens fees revenues have changed over the past decade. And as a reminder, that's the 59% of the revenue, the biggest piece of the pie. So overall, we've seen modest growth since 2010, And, if you were to add a trend line in here, it would be positive, albeit with some down years. But that's the trend that we're projecting to continue. So moving on into recommended revenue for FY20, and here it's compared with where at mid-year we projected to end this current fiscal year. And so here revenue is split into three main categories. First and foremost, we have golf operations, which as you can see is by far the most significant piece. And everything in here is derived from the contract with our golf management company, CourseCo, for which we're proposing 3.6% growth. And then following that is concession revenue from Mulligan's Cafe, which is proposed at 2% growth, which overall leads to recommending an increase of just over $100,000 and 3.5% growth. So we also have a few proposed fee changes for this year, including the examples that you can see here on the slide. The preferred club card $10 increase is probably the most notable, which is why we've chosen to call it out here. And this is really the first increase since the club card program was started with CourseCo, from $69 a year to $79 a year. And with that $10 increase, we're also adding incentives to increase the value for the golfers, such as $5 off of certain greens fees, preferred only pricing specials, and $5 off of special events. And then in January, most 18-hole greens fees will increase by $1, except for juniors, which will stay the same. And that occurs in January just for consistency with other local courses and what we've done in the past. And then there are a few other moderate fee increases, most of which also correspond with increases in value to the golfer. But it's worth noting that most fees will stay the same, and with these changes, Santa Barbara Golf Club is still by far the best value golf in the local area. So moving into expenses, you can see a breakdown here by category. Currently, we are proposing a $8,400 decrease in salaries and benefits compared with last year's budget, but that's actually an increase from where we're projecting to end this year at just about $60,000. We're proposing a 2.5% increase in supplies and services, which is again by far the largest line item, and this is where all operating costs for maintenance and the pro shop reside. This reflects an increased cost of water along with maintenance costs to enhance the playability and course conditions for the golfers. And overall, this results in proposing a 1.1% increase in FY20 expenses. And then taking a look at how the proposed budget impacts reserves. In FY18, the Golf Fund had a closing balance of just over $100,000. As of mid-year this year, we projected to end the year with additions to reserves, resulting in a fund balance of about $252,000. And then the proposed budgets in 20 and 21 would each add just about another $134,000 each to reserves, resulting in a positive fund balance of about $521,000. And so this is making progress towards meeting the city's policy level, which for the Golf Fund is about $900,000, and it's set the same criteria that Jill discussed earlier. And so overall, our financial strategy is really to make sure that we get there over time, while also continuing to make needed investments in capital and to maintain the course quality and provide a high value experience for our golfers. And then moving into the proposed capital budget for FY20. So the Players Improvement Fund, as you may recall, allocates $1 from every paid round of golf to support projects identified by the Golf Advisory Committee. So you can see here we've allocated $57,000, which is in line with our projection of receiving about 57,000 paid rounds in the coming year. And then you can just see here some of the other upcoming projects. A big priority in terms of course improvements for the coming year is rebuilding the number 9 green, and then additionally making needed improvements to irrigation and other infrastructure and upgrading maintenance equipment where needed, to a total of $247,000. And then finally, performance measures. There are really no substantive changes to the performance measures in FY20. We're going to continue growing greens and cart fee revenues, managing water usage, excelling in customer service, and attracting and retaining preferred card holders. And at the regular meeting on April 10th, earlier in this month, the Golf Advisory Committee recommended the approval of the proposed operating budget, capital budget, and fees and charges schedule for fiscal year 2020. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much.
It is just wonderful to see a positive side to our golf fund. For so many years, we struggled, and it's nice to have the hard votes we took up here pay off, and to see the reserve fund grow and the golf course to be on stable ground again, even with the winter that we had, which was a great impact, I'm sure, to the number of days that were playable. So I'm just very happy that this is still available in such an affordable fashion for the residents of Santa Barbara. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, we actually, I'm sorry to say, have a few more slides because we haven't gone over general fund capital. So if you want to do that, and then I also have an answer for Commissioner Longstreet's question about the capital equipment. So, which perhaps it would be helpful if I just did that first. So I did find it, and it's actually in parks. It's in our grounds maintenance and facilities program budget. And it had to do, if I'm correct in remembering, with a one-time purchase that we did for the flail mower for the Cabrillo Ballpark. So we don't generally program it there. Yeah, the real mower. The wheel mower. You know, I'm not an expert in mowers. So rest assured, what we do in our Parks Division budget is there's always a set amount to replace equipment, small equipment, things that are maintained in-house. It's not a vehicle. It could be power equipment of some kind. And so we always have a certain amount. We cobbled together a lot of that this year after the renovation of Cabrillo Ballpark was complete, realizing that we needed a new piece of equipment in order to maintain the turf in an adequate fashion. So it's actually an example of unexpected expense that we are very creative at covering within our appropriations. So just for that. And then just really briefly, general fund capital. We're never going to see this photo again because this time next year we'll have the new entrance of the Cabrillo Pavilion, hopefully. We have 4 projects that are currently recommended for funding. But if you recall in your November presentation, I just called it up on my computer, we have this major laundry list of all the things we'd like to do in the next 2 years, which ran to the tune of just over $8 million for 2020 and $3 million for 2021. And really what that does is it shows where we're ready to move forward on a number of projects, which is really exciting. We don't always get to move forward with many of our projects. When we put that together, there's a series of meetings that happen, interdepartmental meetings, where we look at all the general fund capital requests. So not just Parks and Recreation, there's library, there's police, there's fire, there's administrative services, and try to prioritize of the limited general fund funding that's allocated each year citywide, which department gets what amount of funds and why. So we try to be very strategic. If we just go back, please. And so really looking at the ones that we know we're going to advance next year, funding will continue to move those projects forward. And next slide would be great. Thank you. So one, field and access improvements for Bonet Park. This project's actually a $1.6 million project. We just got awarded $300,000 in community development block grant funds, which are very much focused on the restroom renovation. This would be a general fund match. We're in the process of trying to secure grant funds for the balance of the project, but we can move forward with some component of it next year, if not the full project. Dwight Murphy Ball Field renovation, you'll see in parentheses Measure C. So part of what we look at when we're looking at capital is which projects do benefit from some Measure C revenue, and this is one of them. We'll be able to start doing more detailed planning work and technical studies for the master plan next year. or take a park renovation. We've already started down the path of preliminary design and right-of-way. This will take us another step forward in terms of design, mostly for the field improvements and other recreation amenities. The pool will probably be looking for funding in the following year. And then West Beach Splash Playground, this funding would take us all the way through plans, permits, ready for construction. We're in the process of doing that right now, but once you get your design review approval and your coastal development permit, then you actually have to sharpen the pencil and develop the construction drawings so you can go out to bid. So it's 900,000 out of 8.1. I would also add in one of the things that is happening over the next number of years is a loan from the general fund and Measure C to complete the Cabrillo Pavilion. It's not shown here. It's being taken separately. But as you know, we've always been slightly short on construction funding. The fundraising effort hasn't been as successful as we anticipated it would be. We do need to complete the project. We're still looking for funds, grant funds, and we'll continue to actively do that. So there is a separate source of funds to keep that project going so that we can wrap it up by October. And with that, our recommendation is that you recommend City Council approve our recommended budget. I'm just going to say all three funds, the capital program and the fees and charges schedule. Thank you. 4 funds.
I have a question on that last point that you just made about the loan for the Cabrillo. I keep getting confused between Cabrillo and Cabrillo, but for the pavilion. How much is that loan for? What's the gap, is what I'm asking.
Well, the gap right now, the first loan is $5 million, which was approved at the mid-year budget cycle in order to make sure we had enough appropriations to continue paying Diani. And then subsequently, it'll be another $2 million, maybe $3 million by the time we're done. That assumes that the fundraising isn't super successful. We still have a number of requests out that we're hoping will be successful. But the project's under construction, so we're continuing to move it forward.
So just to follow up, so how does repayment of this kind of loan work? I mean, where do those monies come from?
So it essentially is paid through Measure C revenues, and it's a portion of those revenues over a number of years, rather than just a huge chunk of Measure C funding going for that one project. City's priority, the community's priority to deal with streets and sidewalks and roads. That work still needs to occur. So the concept is that the loan from the general fund gets paid over a 5-year period out of Measure C. So a little bit of Measure C funds get returned to the general fund over, I think it's a 5-year period starting in 2021.
Okay, so we already voted on everything except for the golf fund and the capital program. So I would like to entertain a motion.
I would move that we accept the golf fund budget for 2020 and 2021, I guess we're doing both, and that we convey to council our pleasure with how the golf course is being run. Thank you.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Capital? Do we need a motion on capital?
I move that we accept the recommendation for the Capital Projects Fund.
I'll second. Oh, go ahead.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, we felt it was important to bring this presentation to you. Rich Hanna will walk through some of our history, particularly for newer commissioners, and also in light of the fact that the City Council will be considering homelessness and the city's response to homelessness at its meeting next Tuesday, of which we play a fairly significant role given the public open spaces that we manage. And we wanted to give you an update. This is not an action item. Anticipate after the council meeting, we may be bringing something more back to you related to this.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, it's my pleasure to be here to give you a short presentation and just an update on Park and Recreation Facility public use and misuse. Just by way of background, we came to the Commission December 2016 with kind of a very comprehensive impact statement for the programs and services in our parks as it related to the department and related to concerns, management challenges, and strategies. At that meeting, we were asked to come back with an update. We did that in February 2017 with some of our response strategies, and those are really focused around improving communication, working with the free meals providers to really develop a permit process, and just really, and so those were the two recommendations that came out of that. Today we're here just to really talk about the ongoing impacts, concerns, and strategies that we can continue to see in our parks and around our recreation facilities. And as Ms. Zachary mentioned, the report that will be going forward on the city's efforts related to homelessness will be next Tuesday at City Council. So just by way of background, long history of addressing issues related to the chronically poor, mentally ill, and unhoused. In the last 15 years, there's been an increase of misuse of public spaces, including parks and recreation facilities. A lot of times when we see changes in other parts of the community, they result in increased impacts both around our recreation facilities and our parks. Our department response is focused on management strategies to increase safety, both for the participants and also our staff, improve usability and reduce impacts. And throughout this entire process and even going forward, we realize we need to broaden our solutions as we deal with this. So just as a reminder, the most significant areas of misuse, we really classify them into 4 areas. The waterfront area, so that's pretty much all along Cabrillo Boulevard, pretty much starting at Ledbetter all the way around to the Bird Refuge. The downtown area is really the major parks around Davis Center, Morton Bay, Fig Tree, Plaza Veracruz, Upper State, Mackenzie, and Oak Park areas. And then the East Side Municipal Tennis, which has seen a decline since all of the activity that's gone in over there. The East Side Neighborhood Park and Ortega Park. And all of these areas in general have a lot of similarities. They either have off-site beverage sales, they're around other service providers where people may go get meals, or somebody out of the goodness of their heart has gone to those areas and they distribute food on some regular basis. So these are the areas where we really see the biggest impact to the parks and recreation infrastructure. So the types of misuse that we see that it's reported by our staff or we hear from the community: disruptive behavior, that can include verbal abuse and physical aggression, criminal activity, that's the drug sales, the prostitution, the use of alcohol, vandalism of park restrooms, playgrounds, and other park resources, whether it's sprinkler heads, benches, things that, just become used for a different purpose than what they were intended, end up being vandalized. We see a lot of undesirable overnight use and encampments, especially around our rental facilities that are not used every single day of the week. We get people that choose to encamp in those areas. And really the impact is really excessive trash on our parks operations staff. The impacts to the public, areas where we have sports fields, picnicking, and children's play become obstructed. People choose to not go to those areas for a perception of that they're just not safe. The misuse of our park restrooms, as I said, a lot of illegal activity, or just people use that as their means for bathing. The presence of large groups, public intoxication, fighting, and verbal abuse happens a lot. Interference with facility operations and private events. It's not uncommon for individuals to walk into a private event and start moving in on somebody's food line, and staff have to deal with that. And then reduced public use of park areas due to concern about safety. And I think, this could be perceived safety, but in general, people choose to exercise in different places or take a different path when they're moving through around the city and in our park areas. That's definitely an impact to as it relates to public park misuse. So the department impacts, we've kind of boiled them down to a couple of key areas. The unsafe working conditions. This is staff that are exposed to verbal abuse, in some cases physical assaults, sanitation, and staff morale. And our staff want to go out there and do the best job possible, and they can spend countless hours doing a cleanup in an area and show up the next day and right back at it and really no progress. Revenue loss as it relates to lower recreation program participation. We have had people that have asked for full refunds, have withdrawn from our programs, have found another service provider where maybe misuse is not as prevalent. And in some cases, what we've quantified as people that have gone to view a facility to rent for their special occasion, encountered a situation, it automatically switched their decision to not rent that facility. What we can't quantify is how many people go around and look at our facilities without meeting with staff and getting that tour, and what their perception is in terms of renting that for their special event. And then the diversion of limited resources, the customer service and satisfaction. Even our recreation staff that may not be doing the cleanup deal a lot with public customer service as it relates to events, what people's experiences is, what their camp experience was. Encampment cleanup. So these are the areas where people are kind of entrenched and they've brought all their belongings and they grow in size. And when we have to go and do an encampment, we have to post for 72 hours, which is legally required. We have to maintain things that are over a certain value threshold if we do go in and remove the encampment. And currently, park staff actually do the entire breakdown of an encampment. And we could end up sending 3 or 4 crews, so up to about 9 or 10 staff to that site, along with a park ranger, just to break down an encampment. Increased maintenance requirements. Again, that just goes back to the vandalism, and then increased enforcement. Encampment cleanups, both the Parks and the Creeks Division experience this on a regular occasion. So for the period of a 2-year reporting period, which is what a lot of this data is, you'll see as we go into the table before, Parks dealt with 309 encampment sites, and the picture to the right kind of illustrates when I say people have moved in, that's where they're living. Creeks, 502 sites, and that's really in the creeks and waterways and down the railway corridors and places that you don't typically see as much as you might see in our parks. And as it relates to the staff resources, when you try to quantify this, the parks operations staff spend almost 11,000 hours dealing with encampment cleanup, and the creeks contract services on average, even though I have a contract of about $180,000 for creek management, cleanups, and so forth, the amount that's directed to the actual encampment cleanups is closer to $120,000. The increased maintenance requirements as it's related to misuse. Again, this is the litter, the pollutants, the human waste, the excessive maintenance. Playgrounds and picnic areas, we're constantly in there cleaning. We're having to use power washers and sprayers instead of just regular hoses and sweeping and cleaning up after events. Restroom cleaning and supplies. So when our restrooms are used for misuse activity, it's not just the damage or the way the restroom's left. All the supplies are typically removed or in a way that they just can't be used. So we have to replenish that for all the other park users. And then recently, in the last 6 months, given an increase in the number of needles park staff have encountered, we've actually engaged in a contract service where any needles that we collect, we now meet a threshold, and then we're able to ship those away for safe disposal. As it relates to enforcement, this kind of harkens back to Ms. Zachary's comment earlier. Parks and Recreation have a job to provide clean, safe, enjoyable spaces for the community. We do have an enforcement arm both in the creeks and in the parks divisions. Our park rangers ultimately are looking for voluntary compliance. It's the spirit of the law. If they have to, they'll issue citations, which is the letter of the law. They also are involved in the encampment posting and then oversight anytime there's an encampment cleanup. And looking back over our data, we estimate that about 65% of one of our park rangers' time is tied to park misuse. And that could be encampment, but that could be getting called to move individuals off of a park so we can get our mow schedule accomplished for the day, or responding to a recreation facility. So this is a big chunk of one park ranger's time. We only have 3. And on some cases, we only have one on duty, and on weekends, maybe as much as 3, just the way the schedule breaks out across the course of a week. In the Creeks Division, the code enforcement officer, they spend pretty much 40% of their time, but what they do is they go in and locate the illegal encampments, and then they coordinate with the contractor to both post and then provide the oversight for the encampment cleanups in the creek areas. This picture up to the right here, I'm pretty sure it's La Mesa Park. And again, just something that our park ranger would encounter on an occasion. And, you know, our park rangers use the highest amount of diplomacy to move people on voluntarily, so we can keep our parks clean and safe for those that are coming afterwards. From a department impact summary, this is a 2-year period. I just wanted to call out some numbers. I won't read the numbers out, but operations is anything that's not encampment related and is not restroom servicing or maintenance. So if we go in and we hose out the restrooms and we're stocking the restrooms, that's captured in the restroom maintenance area. So just the impact to operations alone, you can see is almost $700,000 as it relates to just litter and trash and other misuse behaviors. Our park rangers' time in there, that's the 65%. That's 65% of their salary. Over a 2-year period. In recreation, it's the calls, the customer service, the assurances that their facility is going to be okay. That equates to slightly over $100,000 over a 2-year period. And the Creeks is the enforcement officer that I referenced earlier, 40% of their time over a 2-year period. So when you look at what I would consider staffing as it relates to misuse, you're looking at a little over or just under $1.3 million spent by the department for park misuse impacts. And if you look at the hours, it's almost 10 full-time equivalent employees dedicated to just this component. And you can see how that pulls away from all of our other park responsibilities and duties. Included in here is the Creeks contract. So I just want to be clear, the Creeks allocate $180,000 per year for creek cleanups. Some of that, a significant portion of that, is actually used for encampment cleanups. So if you take the 180 twice, it's 360, but there's only a portion of that that's used for the actual encampment cleanups, and that was closer to the $60,000 number I gave you earlier. Equipment, Parks and Recreation has been working with parks to purchase signage and some cabling, things that we're trying to be creative in terms of defining rentable spaces and having the signage that's necessary for police to come in and enforce the ordinances. Creeks equipment costs are related to some portable restrooms they leave in locations, one of them for sure being over by Dwight Murphy Park, right up against the railway corridor there, that helps them keep the creeks clean, and then some fencing. And the lost revenue is just what we could quantify in terms of events choosing not to, or people choosing not to use our facilities for an event, or refunds that we've had to give out. So you can see the impact to the department as it relates to park misuse. So the constraints to addressing misuse, as I referenced earlier, our mission is to provide safe and clean parks and recreation facilities, clean creeks, healthy beaches, and protected open spaces. Our constraints: limited staffing and funding, staff safety and health concerns, lack of enforcement, power and prosecution, resistance and apathy among the homeless. And that's really related to incarceration. So if somebody feels like they're going to get cited and there's really no further prosecution or enforcement, there's just a general apathy. I'll take the ticket and nothing really happens. So some of the ways the department is looking to be creative, and I say creative very generously, we have enhanced our communication with key stakeholders, whether that's from the district attorney's office and environmental services. That's our Creeks division, work with them. They bring everybody together and they look at how they're going to target areas of misuse and encampments and then work to clean those up. The department, or the Parks Division and the Recreation Division, meet with the police department quarterly. We actually provide them with a calendar as we're going into summer with our recreation sites that have typical misuse. We ask them to come in ahead of time and maybe dissuade people from being there, and then it's really all designed to coordinate and maximize resources. We look at park renovation projects, all the master plan projects and the projects that Ms. Zachary talked about. We think about where the building's going to be positioned, how it's going to function, how can we activate the park. All of those components are as a key strategy, not in just re-envisioning the park and providing a recreation service, but also it's a strategy to deal with misuse. Increasing activity in parks. We've worked successfully with youth serving organizations, primarily at Ortega Park. We allowed them to put in a temporary home run fence because they didn't really have that anywhere else in our park infrastructure other than at Mackenzie Park, which is the home of Pony Baseball. And in doing that, they now use the park a lot more than they did in the past. So we've activated the park with youth participation. And then also we worked with Santa Barbara Revolution to do soccer tournaments at Ortega Park. Again, really activating that space. And what we found is by activating the space, they choose not to maybe want to hang out in that area and they find somewhere else to go. So it makes the entire park experience safer for the period of time that those activities are going on. And then defining and reservable and permitted locations. This is where it's temporary. We're trying something new. These are just cables that we've put in. We have them at the Carousel House. The thought was if we had a sign and the police are called or the rangers are called that has the municipal code, it makes it a citable offense for them to be in there. It prevents them from bringing in shopping carts and large amounts of equipment. Obviously, there's something that people can step through and still find their ways into these areas. But in putting these up at the Carousel House, we saw a significant decrease in the amount of individuals that were sleeping between the exterior carousel walls and the building. We've taken this concept, we've added it to the patio at Mackenzie Center up at Mackenzie Park, another area where we've had typical misuse, and we're actually coming up with a system for Chase Palm Park Center patio also. The key thing with all of these is they're temporary, meaning staff just have to unlock and roll up a cable, and the renter would never know that the area is defined or in any way would impact their special event or their special day. When the event's over, these things go back up, and it's just a deterrent. And as we go forward, if they're successful, we'll look at more permanent solutions and all of the necessary permits that are required with that. Options that are still on the table for enhanced management would be municipal code amendments. Some of this is addressed to adult access to playgrounds. This came up at a presentation when we did the Dwight Murphy master plan presentation at council. One of the council members, Councilmember Friedman, brought this up, and it's something that we're researching. And we're also, as we're going through all of our park sign replacement program and updating, we're looking at standardizing opening and closing times for park sites. What that does is it provides a standard for staff just in general in the community, but also means when the park's closed, the park is closed. And people that are in the park, if they're engaged in misuse, could be cited. Individuals that are in the park that really aren't engaged in misuse activity typically don't warrant some sort of a phone call to the police department. Looking to increase contract funding in fiscal year 2020. We, as part of our budget process, we made the case that $20,000 would deal with a significant chunk, if not all, of the encampments we see in the Parks Division. That money has been budgeted in the environmental services proposed budget for fiscal year 20. So we'd be coordinating encampment cleanup in our parks similar to the way that streets and public works coordinate them in other areas of the city. So that's something that's moving forward. And then obviously hiring an additional park ranger that could legally post and supervise encampments, monitor special events, lock park gates and restrooms on a daily basis, and really be that additional resource. There's a cost associated with that, and that's just the salary for the staff person. It doesn't include the training and all the equipment, but it's certainly an option as far as it relates to an enhanced management opportunity. So the next steps, the city will be taking a big presentation to City Council on Tuesday, April 30th, 2019, related to the city's efforts. The department will continue existing efforts, the ones that we have underway, and we'll continue to broaden our solutions as we move forward. And I just leave you with this picture on the right here. This is Ortega, the way that it should look and feel and function for the community, whether you're a baseball fan or a soccer fan. But that's what people should expect when they go to a park in terms of recreating, and that's our goal, is to get to that type of experience for the community. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
I have a question. So will this report go to the April 30th meeting, April 30th City Council meeting.
Chair Clark, Commissioner Longstreet, the numbers in this report are included in a larger citywide report. And the way it's been presented to you is very focused on our department, but we're part of a larger presentation. The options in terms of ways to advance in management will be presented to council. I think it's safe to say that we have the lion's share of the sort of fiscal impact related to addressing this issue in our park system.
And that's my concern, is we just received a budget that really didn't have any increases in parks. You know, we haven't had increases in parks. And yeah, water is is a huge issue, but this, when you look at the numbers, is an incredible impact, and the impact it has affects all of our park users. It's really brings you up short, I think, to have it written down. And it's not an exaggeration, because when I walk in the morning, this is what I see. This is what I see at Pershing Park and in the waterfront. And you cut across an island at the West Beach parking lot, and there's two guys sleeping, and toilet paper everywhere. And so this is not a surprise to any of us who utilize the park. So as it goes forward, whether we wrap these comments into the budget memo or whether they go separately in the homeless, and whether commissioners need to attend that meeting if possible and represent our concerns. And I maybe I'm speaking only for myself, but I purely doubt that. We're all here because we care about our facilities, and I care about our staff. I think we all do. So, this is just dismaying. And we see downtown organized to talk about it, and it's a great impact, and I'm not lessening the impact it has on downtown, but we don't have the users of our parks, the people going to swimming at Ortega or trying to go to the beach or Pershing Park. They're not coming and saying this, and until there's a needle found somewhere and everybody, it's a huge surprise. It isn't, So how we wrap these comments into and convey them to City Council is important, I think.
Yeah, along the lines of that comment, do you think it would be helpful for us to attend that meeting and to do a public comment, or what can we do to help? Because I too am really shocked by the fiscal impacts, first of all. And then just about how much time and effort and pounds and tons of waste. I've heard the report from Creeks as well. That's a lot of that one position. And I'm just shocked at how much it's increased. It's not getting any better. It's like exponentially increasing. Even along East Beach, I'm real passionate about the beach. I live right there. I go there literally 6 times a week. And there's a ton of people. I feel like the regular usage is not deterring the misuse, because there's just constantly people all the times of the day, tourists, people who live there, people like me. And so that's one area that is really concerning as far as pollution and just the amount of people that are down there with misuse and the amount of regular use that is not deterring the misuse. Because I feel like that's a good strategy in a lot of these areas. The beach is different, and I just am curious how to tackle that. And it is different from the downtown issues. And I just feel like it's more impactful on the environment in this department. And how do we try to prevent that in some way? What can we do?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, certainly your interest in and desire and ability to attend a council meeting is a great way to communicate with council members your perspective on the issues. If you look at the numbers that were presented, it's about 10% of our parks operating budget. If you take 1.4 and you divide it by 2, because that's 2 years worth of data. And then we showed you our pie chart that indicates of the 8 million, really only about 7 is spent in an actual park. It's probably on that order, and it's to the extent that we can quantify it. We track things very carefully. I mean, it's a problem citywide, and it's of particular concern, as you can see in certain park areas. From the department's standpoint as well, it's really tough on the staff and their morale and why they're here and what they're doing. People have the ability to use a park properly, and everybody should have that right. And then when you spend more time trying to address the impacts of a few, it reverberates out to the larger community. Commission support for our renovation projects and reinvesting in our parks is really very helpful as well. The things that we do, even little things, the way we redesigned the restroom entrance in Chase Palm Park to address activities that were happening overnight because there was a nice place to hang out. We've done those things. Cabrillo Ballpark is a prime example. 10 years ago, we had all sorts of issues at that park. That doesn't happen today because we've reinvested in it. So in some ways, it really has to do with that kind of activity and changing the way a park is used. We have parks that, like Dwight Murphy and Ortega, haven't had a lot of investment, and so their facilities aren't as functional, and therefore it doesn't bring the kind of use that we would like. The beachfront is a really tough nut to crack. There's no doubt about it. And that's why when we look at reopening the pavilion, one of the number one questions from people is, what are you going to do about how the place is used? And it's like, well, these are the strategies that we have in place. These are the design approaches that we've done in terms of lighting and operations. And then having an extra set of eyes and ears, like a security, like you see in a supermarket parking lot or a shopping mall. I mean, that's what you see private landowners doing in order to manage how their spaces are used. We're in a position where we see that that's what we have to do as well. And it's really tough. There's no great answer to how we make change for the whole community.
Yeah, it's really hard for me to speak to the subject of homelessness and homeless people's rights because I am a nurse, and it's homeless people make up a large percentage of the population that I care for. And it's not just a problem in our parks, it's a problem in our hospitals too. And it affects our staff on a daily basis, and our morale goes down. And just this week, I can't talk about it, but everybody just left a 12-hour shift destroyed because of the behavior of some individuals. And we feel powerless, just like the Parks Department feels powerless. I guess something that frustrates me is if a person who was temporarily undomiciled, which I think is a PC way of saying homeless, went into Nordstrom's and they shot up in the bathrooms and they smeared feces on the floor and they took the toilet paper and they scared the children, it wouldn't be Nordstrom's personnel taking care of it. It would be law enforcement coming in and helping take care of the problem. And maybe I'm not out enough in the community and seeing this happen, but from this discussion and other discussions we've had, it feels like it's our burden more so than it should be. And I would like to see a bigger partnership with law enforcement. I think we need help. And I'm glad that you're having the collaborative meeting with other departments regarding this issue.
So, and I guess to that end, perhaps I know there is a special council meeting on April 30th, but also maybe as part of your overall May 8th presentation to council, this could become a more significant part of that presentation. And I'm really echoing your comments that it really frustrates me to hear the overtone of we are limited in what we can do, and we have to do X, Y, Z before we can do anything that all of us would think would be the appropriate activities. It's not right for the community, and it's certainly not right for your staff. So it seems like that I would like to see this actually quite a prominent part of the May 8th presentation as well as the April 30th presentation, because it's so much a part of the impact on your staff and the financial impacts. And as you've said many times, the community, we all know that many people don't use the program just because they're afraid to.
So commissioners, anticipate that out of the 30th meeting, there'll be subsequent, and clearly the May 8th budget presentation falls quickly on the heels of next Tuesday. Be happy to answer any other questions you have. I'd be happy to forward you the link. The staff report for the council meeting will be available tomorrow.
Great.
So you can see what's been prepared for council consideration, and then certainly answer any questions and follow up with you.
And I too would like to encourage everybody to attend the council meeting if they can. I will be at work and not able to, but if you can go, please go.
Or send an email to mayor and council about concerns.
Does anyone have anything else to discuss before we adjourn for the evening? Okay, adjourned.